It was from the Cataclysm. I can illuminate the technological tree. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151, Starship Driving Training Institution. One day later, Human Alliance Starship Driving Training Institution. Point in the office. Everyone is immersed in sorting the documents in front of them. Old. Song. Are the background check results out? A male voice sounded in the quiet office. Point upon hearing this question, a middle-aged man about 40 years old suddenly raised his head from the pile of documents in front of him and looked forward. Principal Zhang, the results are out. As he spoke, Song Xiangming picked up a document on his desk and handed it to the man standing in front of him. Point. The man's name is Zhang Wang, and he is the principal of the People's Alliance Starship Driving Training Institution. It is affiliated with the Academy of Sciences and is fully responsible for the training of starship pilots. Zhang Wang reached out and took the document handed over by Song Xiangming and opened a page at random. Zhao, Ziji, ordinary families in elementary school get 3 top students every year. In junior high school, there was a bit of weirdness in Zhang Wang's expression. Point. With such detailed background information, a guess suddenly appeared in his mind. Point. He took a deep breath and sighed softly. Is this done by Zero? Song Xiangming nodded quickly. Yes, the Academy of Sciences attaches great importance to it and specially allocated some resources to us. Zhang Wang nodded thoughtfully. Now that the background review has been completed, let's find a time to notify them to come over. By coincidence, my test questions have also been completed. Okay. Song Xiangming nodded vigorously. Point. Magic City. Point. After watching the live broadcast of the construction of the space elevator, Zhao Ziji was thinking about the application he submitted. Point. I don't know when I will be notified. Point. Thinking of the identity and background requirements on the registration page, Zhao Ziji's heart beat. Point. Although he could guarantee that he and his parents had not done anything wrong, but the previous generation, he really didn't. No. Point. He sat on the sofa, staring blankly out the window, recalling everything that had happened over the past year, from the abnormal global aurora to the birth of the Zhuan series of space planes, from the Pangu fusion reactor to the birth of the space elevator. Every trivial matter was strung together into a complete event in his mind. Point. Zhao Ziji looked at the blue sky outside the window and sighed deeply. Point. I don't know how long such a peaceful life can last. If the registration is unsuccessful, his eyes were full of confusion. Point. I really don't know how an ordinary person can protect himself in such an era. Point. Just as he was about to get up and pick up the books on the table next to him to review some more, a familiar cell phone rang. Point. Zhao Ziji was slightly startled. Point. Who would call him at this time? He turned around and grabbed the cell phone on the sofa. Point. A series of strange unfamiliar numbers. He hesitated for a moment and pressed the answer button. Hello, is this Zhao Ziji? This is the People's Alliance Starship Driving Training Institution. Listening to the smooth female voice on the phone, Zhao Ziji's heart began to beat violently. Excuse me, are you the one who signed up for this Starship pilot training program? Yes, I signed up myself, Zhao Ziji asked with a somewhat rapid breathing. Excuse me, the female voice on the microphone interrupted him. Congratulations on passing the background review. Please go to the capital within 3 working days. Zhao Ziji quickly got up, ran all the way to the computer desk, grabbed a pen, and wrote down the address in the blank space. Okay, I understand. After hanging up the phone, the smile on his face gradually grew stronger. Success. Although the background check was only the most basic level, he still breathed a sigh of relief. Point. At least he is now qualified to compete for the position of starship pilot. At the same time, outside the window that he didn't notice, a camera on the roadside quietly changed its angle. Point. The next day. Point. Carrying a black backpack, Zhao Ziji walked off the subway with the crowd and entered the high-speed rail station. Point. He booked a high-speed train ticket for 9:30 in the morning, and it was still more than an hour before departure. Point. After thinking for a while, He walked towards a breakfast shop point in the corner, where he didn't notice. The cameras quietly changed their positions and captured his actions without missing a beat point after ordering. Zaozuji sat silently in a corner of the breakfast shop point ever since he was a child. He didn't like crowded places. He prefers to sit alone in a secluded corner and silently observe everyone's expressions and movements just like before. After Zaozuji sat on the chair, his eyes subconsciously glanced at the people sitting in the lobby eating. "Hello, this is your sticky rice." His act of human observation was interrupted by the waiter's voice. "Oh, okay, thank you." Zaozuji subconsciously nodded to the waiter to thank him point, but the next moment, his movement suddenly stopped. "Sir? What's wrong?" the waitress asked softly with a gentle smile on her face. Zaozuji frowned slightly and shook his head. "It's okay, I'm sorry, maybe I'm too sensitive." The smile on the waitress's face did not change at all. "Okay sir, if you have any other needs, just let me know." After saying that, the waiter turned around and left. Zaozuji frowned and looked at the waiter's back, lost in thought. He didn't know why, but he always felt that this waiter was a bit weird. At least, it doesn't look like a waiter. After thinking for a while, Zaozuji, who didn't get any answer, chose to give up. Just as he was about to concentrate on dealing with the glutinous rice in front of him, he suddenly saw an extremely abnormal scene from the corner of his eye. A woman holding a child, sitting quietly in the corner of the lobby. At first glance, it seems that there is no big problem. But the child's sleeping posture is a bit strange. It doesn't look like sleeping, but like coma. The moment this thought flashed through his mind, Zaozuji's heart jumped suddenly. Could it be that he ran into the so-called human traffickers? He put down the chopsticks in his hand and prepared to get up. The G713,258 train from the Magic City to the capital has started to check tickets. Please. The broadcast outside the store came at the right time. Zaozuji frowned and fell into hesitation. After thinking about it, he gave up the idea of meddling. At this time, he can't afford any mistakes. If he missed this interview because of meddling, he would probably regret it for the rest of his life. Thinking of this, Zaozuji sighed slightly, turned around, grabbed the packed glutinous rice, and walked out of the restaurant. The camera in the high-speed rail station moved slowly, watching him go away. After confirming that Zaozuji had left, the waiter breathed a sigh of relief. She reached out and grabbed the intercom in the counter and said, "Team leader, this guy is very vigilant. I almost got caught just now. Be careful when you follow up." The next moment, a male voice came from the intercom. "Received. Chapter 152 Coincidence? Assessment?" After boarding the high-speed train, Zaozuji silently followed the crowd and found his seat. A window seat in the corner. After putting away his backpack, he took out his headphones and prepared to rely on music to spend this several-hour journey. As soon as he took out the headphones and was about to put them on, he froze on the spot. The abnormal woman in the breakfast shop actually got on the high-speed train. Seeing the woman walking towards the seat next to him, Zaozuji's heart twitched suddenly. Is this a coincidence? Before Zaozuji could think more, the woman sat on the seat next to him. "Little brother, I'm sorry," the woman said apologetically. "The children may be a little noisy. Please be more patient." Zaozuji did not speak, but nodded slightly. His eyes again swept over the woman's face and the face of the child in her arms. The look on the woman's face is natural, but the child, although there was no evidence, he just felt a little weird. Although he is not married, has no children, and has no experience in taking care of children, his intuition tells him that the normal sleeping position of a child is definitely not like this. Zaozuji swallowed slightly, and countless thoughts quickly emerged in his mind. Ever since he was a child, he had never believed in coincidences. In his opinion, most coincidences in the world are the product of intentional or unintentional consequences, not to mention several coincidences colliding together. Although there was no evidence He had some guesses in his mind. It is estimated that the real assessment started from the moment he entered the high-speed rail station. The waiter at the breakfast shop and the woman next to him should be part of the assessment. Only didn't know the assessment criteria. According to common sense, when faced with this kind of human trafficker, he should report it directly and assist the police in arresting him. But this is an unprecedented Starship pilot assessment after all. Who knows what the above standards are for Starship pilots? If the correct answer is to let it go, wouldn't he just lose at the starting line? Ziji slowly put on the headphones. A familiar melody came. Accompanied by the Croatian Rhapsody. Ziji slowly closed his eyes. The music rhythm is very lively, but the scene described is the ruins of Croatia in the ashes after being baptized by war. The high speed rail has started. Ziji became more and more confused. Little brother, do you have water here? Just as Ziji was struggling, the woman on the side suddenly poked his arm gently and asked in a low voice. He opened his eyes slightly and looked at the woman next to him with confusion. Water? The woman nodded slightly. Yes, just mineral water is fine. I'll make some milk powder. Ziji subconsciously took out an unopened bottle of ice mineral water from his bag and handed it to the woman. The moment he saw the woman using cold mineral water to prepare milk powder, Ziji's eyes suddenly widened. What is this called? Is this considered an open book exam? Which mother would use ice water to make milk powder for her child to drink? Just when he was about to stand up and expose the trafficker next to him, he suddenly stopped. No, it can't be exposed so simply. What if the assessment criterion is to subdue the target without alerting it? Ziji looked at the slightly awkward movements of the woman next to him in preparing milk powder and said silently, "Can you give me a moment? I need to go to the toilet." The woman was stunned for a moment, then stood up with her child in her arms and gave way to her seat. A few minutes later, do you suspect that the passenger next to you is a human trafficker? Hearing Ziji's words, the expressions of several police officers instantly became serious. Are you sure? Ziji nodded quickly and then told every abnormality he observed. The leading police officer frowned slightly. Listening to what you said, it does make some sense. Come on, let's go with you and see what's going on. That's her. After returning to his compartment, Ziji reached out and pointed at the woman sitting on the chair and said softly to the police officers on the side. The leading police officer nodded silently and walked towards the woman who was trying to feed her ice milk powder. What are you doing? Seeing several police officers surrounding her, the middle-aged woman's expression changed drastically, and she shouted loudly. This shout immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding passengers. Seeing this reaction, several policemen suddenly knew what was going on. Mom, don't get excited, please. Come with us. There is something wrong with your ticket. In order not to disturb other passengers, the leading policeman found an excuse. The middle-aged woman breathed a sigh of relief, hugged her child, and left with a few police officers muttering. Ziji, who was watching this scene from a distance, had a bit of surprise in his eyes. Unexpectedly, the acting skills of this lady and the policeman are very good. He even thought it was real. He shook his head, sat back in his seat, and closed his eyes again to rest. Little brother, in a daze, Ziji heard calls one after another. He slowly opened his eyes and looked to the side. It's the police officer who was the leader just now. Seemingly seeing the doubt in Ziji's eyes, the police officer smiled and explained, "Little brother, we have confirmed that the woman is indeed a human trafficker." Ziji did not speak, but nodded and looked at the police officer silently. That's it. Facing Ziji's gaze, the police officer felt a little scared, but he quickly said, "To thank you, we are preparing. No need." Ziji shook his head. "This is just what I should do." What? A joke. He doesn't have time to do these thank you ceremonies now. Ding dong. The next station is Beijing High-Speed Railway Station. Passengers who are getting off, please get ready. Hearing the sound of the broadcast, Ziji quickly stood up and waved to the police officer who was hesitant to speak. Beijing. After leaving the high-speed railway station, Ziji quickly found the destination according to the navigation on his mobile phone. Human Alliance Starship Driving Training Institution. Looking at the bright and beautiful sign, Zaoziji swallowed slightly. This sign, can't it be just hung up? Little brother, are you here for an interview? A cheerful voice of an old man came from the side. Come on, fill out this form first, Zaoziji. Sure enough, there is a smiling old man guarding the door of every training institution. While complaining in his heart, he walked over quickly and filled out the form. Hey, Captain Bay? There was a bit of surprise in the old man's voice. Why are you guys here? You are a rare guest, Zaoziji was slightly stunned. Before he could react, a gentle male voice sounded behind Zaoziji. Oh, don't say it, old man. The times are advancing too fast. We have to go back to the furnace and rebuild. Chapter 153. That was indeed a coincidence. Zaoziji stopped filling in the form and turned to look behind him. A young man in his 30s looked in the direction of Zaoziji with a wry smile. Behind the young man, there were two young men, a man and a woman. How? The uncle continued to smile and said, what new technology has Professor Lu come up with? Zaoziji's breath suddenly suffocated. Professor Lu, is it Professor Lu Yongchang? He stared blankly at the young man, known as Captain Bay, focusing all his attention on him. The young man waved his hand helplessly. This time it is not Professor Lu's achievement. It's a trick created by some sub-laboratories. I heard that quantum computers and weak artificial intelligence will be installed on the new generation of starships, and the original consoles will also be replaced with holographic images. No, our old pilots are now. They all have to learn again. Holographic image. Artificial intelligence? Zaoziji finally couldn't restrain his inner excitement and exclaimed, is this true? Uncle, who is this? The young man raised his eyebrows and asked the gatekeeper. Hey, the young people who signed up for Starship pilot training are here for the interview. The uncle waved his hand casually and said. A flash of interest flashed in the young man's eyes, and he looked at Zaoziji carefully. Kid, come on. If you pass the training, I'll treat you to hot pot. A slightly hoarse voice came from another young man. Zaoziji nodded blankly, not knowing what to say for a moment. Then, uncle, let's go first. Captain Bay waved with a smile, turned around and walked into the door. Zaoziji's eyes followed the footsteps of the three people from a distance. Boy, stop looking. The uncle's voice sounded again. Hurry up and fill out the form. He suddenly came back to his senses, turned to look at the gatekeeper, and asked cautiously, Master, those three were? The uncle grinned, showing a bright and proud smile. They were the first pilots of the Zuan spaceplane, because there were too many people for interviews. Zaoziji could only wait in the waiting room. He subconsciously huddled in a corner and took deep breaths to relieve his nervousness. Next, Zaoziji, please come to the A2 office for an interview. His name rang out over the radio. Why did you sign up for this training? Or why do you want to become a starship pilot? As soon as he sat down on the chair, the chief umpire in front of him posed a problem of the century. Zaoziji was silent for a while, with various answers coming to his mind. But in the end, he chose to speak out his inner thoughts. As an ordinary person, I don't want to look at other people's faces when a crisis comes. I hope I can survive this crisis. Upon hearing Zaoziji's answer, the presiding judge frowned instantly. In the past few days, he had heard countless glib answers. Some said they were training for the rise of the People's Federation. Some said they were setting up their minds for the heaven and earth, establishing their lives for the people, inheriting their unique knowledge for the saints, and creating peace for all generations. But it was the first time he heard such a simple and undisguised answer from Zaoziji. He said nothing and silently put a question mark on the paper in front of him. As for why he put the question mark, in his opinion, Zaoziji's answer showed an extremely obvious tendency to retreat and run away. This is an absolutely undesirable mentality for the current human alliance starship pilots. As for Zaoziji, the moment he saw the chief examiner's frown, his heart rate began to rise sharply. What to do? Failed. If I had known earlier, I should have made up a random reason. Why? For a moment, Zaoziji was confused and filled with regret. Ahem. The chief examiner coughed slightly, interrupting Zaoziji's thoughts. Don't be nervous. Next question. Do you know anything about the Zhuan series of starships? The moment he heard the question, he breathed a sigh of relief and nodded hurriedly. I have studied the official books on my own, and I'm very familiar with the operating procedures of the Zhuan series starships. The chief examiner let out a slight sigh, with a hint of suspicion in his eyes. Oh, then, let me test you. After an assessment, the tangled look in the eyes of the chief examiner became more intense. The guy in front of me has a very solid theoretical foundation, which can be said to exceed 99% of the applicants, but this ideology, TSK. The chief examiner skittered slightly, turning to look at the assistant aside. Show me Zero's evaluation. The assistant hurriedly took a document from the side. In the document, Zero detailed his observations of Zaoziji. According to the evaluation, Zaoziji has a strong ability to observe details, correct values, and a sense of justice. He is worth cultivating. The chief examiner took another deep breath. After struggling for a while, he silently drew a tick on the paper in front of him. Congratulations, you passed this interview. The chief examiner said in a deep voice. Next, a staff member will take you to the classroom for the second round of written examination. After a few minutes, Zaoziji followed the chief examiner's assistant in a daze, walking down a corridor filled with cold light. Perhaps because he passed the interview, the joy disturbed his thoughts, and he subconsciously remembered the scene on the high-speed rail. That there is something I want to ask. What? The assistant to the chief judge slowed down his pace subconsciously. Is the child healthy? Zaoziji said in a somewhat hurried tone. Such a young child cannot be given tranquilizers. The assistant to the chief judge stopped abruptly. What are you talking about? The assistant turned around slowly and looked at Zaoziji with a puzzled look. What child? And we never use tranquilizers indiscriminately. Zaoziji's pupils shrank suddenly. An incredible guess came to his mind. Those waiters and train police in the high-speed railway station, aren't they the ones you arranged for assessment? The assistant was stunned. Did you figure it out? Yes, some of the waiters and passengers are indeed our people. The purpose is to observe your performance in daily life and make a simple analysis of your personality. Then, what about the human trafficker? Zaoziji's tone suddenly became excited. Isn't that an actor you arranged? Hearing this, the assistant remembered the record he saw in Zero's analysis report just now. He chuckled and shook his head slowly. Of course not. It is indeed a coincidence. Chapter 154 Bayixun. I'm waiting for you to carry out the mission with me. The assistant chief judge's words made Zaoziji stunned. What? It was really a coincidence? Thinking of his brief hesitation on the high-speed train, Zaoziji suddenly felt a huge sense of guilt. If he really let it go at that time, then, let's go. The classroom is in front. Just when Zaoziji was in a state of confusion, the assistant chief judge's words woke him up. He subconsciously reached out to wipe the cold sweat on his forehead and followed the assistant. We're here, Zaoziji looked in the direction of the assistant's finger-tiered classroom. The classroom was large, but there were not many people in it. It was normal. Background checks and interviews probably screened out most people. Go in and find a seat, the assistant said lightly. Don't think about cheating. This classroom is supervised by artificial intelligence. Zaoziji nodded silently. After entering the classroom, he walked straight to the corner at the back of the classroom. Not long after he sat down, a middle-aged man walked into the lecture hall with a thick stack of test papers in his hand. Seeing this very familiar scene, as if engraved in DNA, Zaoziji's breath suddenly choked. How long has it been since he graduated? Everyone, I believe someone has reminded you. The middle-aged man glanced around and said solemnly, I remind you again here, don't think about cheating. Don't try to challenge the ability of artificial intelligence. Once there is cheating, you will be directly disqualified. Do you understand? Zaoziji's eyes moved slightly. He noticed a situation. At the moment when the middle-aged man finished speaking, the cameras in the four corners of the lecture hall moved slightly. Looking at the dark camera, a chill rose in his heart. The test paper was in hand. Zaoziji casually flipped through the content. After seeing the test content clearly, he suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It was basically theoretical knowledge in the book. He reached out and grabbed the ballpoint pen beside him, and wrote down a series of answers with confidence. Time passed by minute. Zhao Ziji turned to the last page of the test paper, looking at the questions on the test paper. His face changed slightly. If humans meet a civilization with similar technological level after leaving the solar system, what do you think we should do? Why? Please consider each step and give a detailed answer. 50%. Looking at the outrageous blank space and exaggerated score ratio on the test paper, he swallowed slightly. No way could it be that humans have discovered extraterrestrial civilization. He frowned and stared at the test paper in front of him. After struggling for a long time, he wrote down his answer with a serious face. The test is over. Zhao Ziji did not stop and planned to leave directly along the original route. By the way, how did you answer the last question? A slightly greasy male voice came from the side. I don't know how this paper was made. That question alone accounts for half of the score. Zhao Ziji subconsciously slowed down his pace and turned his head to look in the direction of the voice. A fat big-bellied man stood in the aisle and talked to several young men around him who were in similar postures. I think that since we have discovered extraterrestrial civilizations, we should establish a good cooperative and mutually beneficial relationship with them. First of all, hearing this, Zhao Ziji shook his head slightly. A sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth and turned around to leave. Huh? Is it you? A slightly familiar male voice came from the other side. Zhao Ziji turned his head suddenly. The moment he saw the person coming, his eyes suddenly lit up. Bei, Captain. Bei, he called tentatively. Bei Yixuan looked at Zhao Ziji, who had a bit of a maturity on his face, and said with emotion, have you finished the written test? Zhao Ziji nodded quickly. What? Bei Yixuan glanced around and raised his eyebrows slightly. Why don't you discuss the topic with them? Faced with Bei Yixuan's question, Zhao Ziji fell silent. After a long time, he slowly raised his head, stared into Bei Yixuan's eyes, and said seriously, I think what they said is wrong. Oh. Bei Yixuan's eyes became more and more interested. He waved to Zhao Ziji and said, come on, tell me how you answered that question. Hearing this, Zhao Ziji's face immediately showed some hesitation. Bei Yixuan obviously saw Zhao Ziji's hesitation, waved his hand nonchalantly and said, it's okay, relax. Anyway, I'm not responsible for the score. You can just say whatever you want. Zhao Ziji sighed slightly and whispered a few words. Genocide. The smile on Bei Yixuan's face froze instantly. He took a deep breath and opened his mouth again to confirm. What did you say? Genocide. Zhao Ziji nodded silently and continued. Yes, it may be a little extreme, but I think those who are not of our race must have different hearts. We should take the most severe measures against those extraterrestrial civilizations. Bei Yixuan's eyes became more and more strange. You really answered like this? This is not what a young man in his 20s would dare to say. Especially in such a critical exam. Normal people would think of playing it safe, and basically no one dared to give such a radical answer. Seeing Zhao Ziji nod his head to confirm, Bei Yixuan patted his shoulder meaningfully. Young man, you have a future. Don't be afraid of hardship when you train, and do your best. I'm waiting for you to carry out the mission with me. After saying that, Bei Yixuan turned around and left, leaving Zhao Ziji standing there with a confused look on his face. In a few seconds, he realized what this sentence meant. In addition to his excitement, a chill appeared behind him. Such a radical answer can actually be recognized, connecting the topic again and the current situation of mankind. Could it be that when ordinary people don't know, humans have really discovered extraterrestrial civilizations? I'm afraid it's more than that point. Since these high-level people have such an extreme attitude towards extraterrestrial civilizations, I'm afraid these extraterrestrial civilizations have the same attitude towards humans. In just a few dozen seconds, countless thoughts flashed through Zhao Ziji's mind. Zhao Ziji, is Zhao Ziji here? The middle-aged man who had just distributed the test papers in the examination room hurried back and shouted loudly. Zhao Ziji was stunned for a moment and responded loudly, yes. The moment he saw Zhao Ziji, the middle-aged man's face relaxed a lot. Zhao Ziggy, congratulations, you passed the exam. Next, you will receive a 6-month starship driving training and a 1-year space military theory training. During this period, you cannot contact the outside world. Can you accept this? Because it is a civilian selection, these necessary situations still need to be asked in advance. Point facing the solemn gaze of the middle-aged man, Zao Ziggy nodded vigorously without hesitation. Chapter 155 Deep Sea Liquid. 2 months later, since the breakthrough of second-generation quantum computer technology, the computing power has been greatly improved. Zero use less than 0.01% of the computing power to carry out a simple transformation for the laboratory. Point among them, Lu Yongchang's office is naturally the highlight of the renovation. Professor, there is something you are interested in over there in the biological sub-laboratory. A blue light suddenly lit up on the desk, and a holographic projection image of a gentleman wearing a black suit appeared in midair. This is an anthropomorphic image of Zero autonomous choice. Point as for why I chose the human form, this is also for better communication with researchers within the Academy of Sciences. Lu Yongchang raised his head from the document in front of him and frowned at the holographic image in front of him. What am I interested in? What? As Lu Yongchang finished speaking, the holographic projection interface quietly changed. Point the holographic projection at this time was only the first generation product, and the colors were extremely monotonous in front of Lu Yongchang. A blue picture began to play. Point as the video played, Zero's voice continued to sound. Professor, the overweight state balance technology studied by academician Mao Zengzi has achieved a major breakthrough. Lu Yongchang's eyes suddenly lit up, and he immediately put down the pen in his hand and stood up from the chair. I'll be there right away. Receive. The holographic image on the desk slowly dissipated. Point biology sub-laboratory, brother. Mao. As soon as he walked into the laboratory door, Lu Yongchang saw Mao Zengzi standing in front of the experimental table with excitement and observing something. Point Lu Yongchang's shut obviously startled Mao Zengzi. Point his body trembled suddenly, and then he turned towards the door angrily. Point when he saw that the visitor was Lu Yongchang, he instantly performed a wonderful Sichuan opera face changing. Point the anger on his face turned into a bright smile in just a few seconds. Professor Lu, you're here just in time. Mao Zengzi jogged up to Lu Yongchang happily, stretched out his hand, and grabbed his sleeve. Let's go. Let me show you a magical sight. Lu Yongchang raised his eyebrows. The task I gave you has been completed, right? Mao Zengzi's expression froze, and the smile on his face instantly dropped by half. How do you know? Remember, I haven't reported it yet, right? Lu Yongchang turned his head and glanced at the camera on the side. Point Mao Zengzi suddenly realized it, and his face suddenly fell. Zero, I should have guessed. Hey, I originally wanted to give you a surprise, but forget it. Come with me and show you the research results of our laboratory over the past few months. With that said, Mao Zengzi used another force on his hand to drag Lu Yongchang to the experimental table, where he was just now. Point on the experimental bench. Point a little white mouse sank quietly in a bottle of light yellow solution. Point the white mice had several catheters inserted into their bodies. Based on their location, Lu Yongchang could probably determine the role of these conduits. It is used for nothing more than feeding and excretion. Point the mouse's eyes were closed tightly, and its abdomen was rising and falling slightly, as if it was breathing normally in the air. Mao Zengzi tapped the glass bottle lightly. Point the crisp sound of the glass bottle woke up the little white mouse inside. It suddenly opened its little eyes, and there was a burst of panic. After seeing that it was Mao Zengzi, the little white mouse's movements relaxed again. How about it, Mao Zengzi looked at Lu Yongchang with a proud look on his face. Point Lu Yongchang looked at the white mouse in the solution thoughtfully, nodded slightly, and sighed from the bottom of his heart. It's amazing. It's just, why do I feel that this little white mouse looks familiar? Lu Yongchang frowned slightly and carefully looked at the little white mouse in the container. Ahem. Mao Zengzi said with some embarrassment. This is Aurora's brother. It's normal for you to look familiar, Lu Yongchang. Blanche, full house of loyalty. Lu Yongchang shook his head helplessly. How long has it lived? Mao Zengzi stretched out his finger and gestured with a number. 2 days. Lu Yongchang frowned. This time is a bit short. No, it's 2 weeks. Mao Zengzi raised the corners of his mouth and said with joy, "You will never imagine how miraculous this solution is. In the words of our researchers, it's like artificial amniotic fluid, considering the deep sea pattern you mentioned. We gave this pale yellow solution a name, deep sea fluid." A trace of surprise flashed in Lu Yongchang's eyes. 2 weeks. This is quite a long time. Are there any side effects? Lu Yongchang asked in a deep voice. Point after all, the sequelae of such underwater breathing experiments are often serious. Although the underwater breathing experiments conducted by the United States achieved initial success, in the end all the experimenters died of lung infections. As for the reason, on the one hand, all the liquid inhaled into the lungs cannot be discharged. Point on the other hand, these liquids carry a large number of bacteria and microorganisms on the surface of the human body and cause infection after entering the lungs. When it comes to the core issue of sequelae, Mao Zengzi's expression suddenly became much more serious. He turned to wink at the researcher next to him and said in a deep voice, "So far, we have not seen any side effects. After thoroughly disinfecting the body surface of the mice, we also added a small amount of antibiotics to the deep sea fluid. In addition, we have strengthened the filtering and purification equipment." Mao Zengzi pointed to a machine beside him. Lv Yongchang walked to the machine curiously and looked at it carefully. "What can this thing do, Professor?" "Lu, don't underestimate it," Mao Zengzi said seriously. "This little white mouse can survive safely for 2 weeks, all thanks to it. On the one hand, it can filter various large particles of impurities in deep sea fluid, such as hair and dandruff. On the other hand, it can reduce the number of bacteria and viruses in deep sea fluid as much as possible through ultraviolet rays, and add a small amount of antibiotics to completely eliminate the infection problem. In addition, it can also combine deep sea fluid with fresh oxygen to discharge excess carbon dioxide and other waste gases." Lv Yongchang nodded silently, his eyes full of amazement. "What about the discharge of deep sea fluid? If it is impossible to discharge all the gas in the lungs?" Mao Zengzi's smile became more and more intense. "Why should it be discharged? You mean?" Lv Yongchang's eyes lit up. "Since we can't make the lungs expel all the liquid, why not let the lungs absorb it?" Mao Zengzi pointed to the pale yellow liquid in front of him with a smile. "These deep sea liquids are harmless to the human body and can be completely absorbed by the human body. As for the sequelae, maybe I will go to the toilet more often after I come out of it." Mao Zengzi shrugged and said in a humorous tone. At this time, the researcher who had just left hurried back with a few breeding cages in his hands. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156, Hibernation Chamber Technology. Academician Mao, I have brought some white mice. The researcher placed the cages in his hands on the experimental table and said softly. Mao Zengzi nodded, thanked him softly, and then said to Lu Yongchang again, "Professor Lu, look, there are a total of 13 mice here, and they survived in the deep sea fluid for 24 hours to 312 hours. So far, we have not seen any sequelae." Lu Yongchang leaned down and looked at it carefully. Not bad, not bad." Lu Yongchang nodded with satisfaction. "Has the gorilla experiment been done?" Mao Zengzi shook his head. "There is not enough time. We are going to start experiments on gorillas next week. As for human experiments, we are planning to apply for the use of those extremely vicious death row prisoners. Don't worry, let me think about it." Lu Yongchang pondered for a moment and then said, "I'll look at all the experimental data first." In Mao Zengzi's office. The holographic projection clearly displays the information on deep sea fluids and purification and filtering devices relying on the brain that the system has continuously strengthened for a long time. Lu Yongchang completely mastered this knowledge. In just a few hours he slowly exhaled a breath and closed his eyes. His consciousness sank into the fluorescent green space again. As the white light slowly lights Up, the originally dim cursor begins to glow with bright white light. Overweight state balance technology, preliminary mastery. Then, the white light began to extend again. A slightly dim cursor appeared in front of him. Hibernation cabin technology, based on the brightness of the cursor, he made a rough estimate 80%. In other words, they have mastered 80% of the so-called hibernation cabin technology. He opened his eyes again, and looked at Mao Zengzi, who was sitting aside and waiting. How is it? Mao Zengzi looked a little nervous, like a student waiting for the teacher to correct his homework. Are there any mistakes, Lu? Yongchang smiled and shook his head. There is no problem. You did it perfectly, Mao. Zengzi breathed a sigh of relief, and a smile appeared on his face again. The guerrilla experiment can be postponed. Lu Yongchang continued. Currently, what we should consider is to combine hibernation with deep sea fluid. Mao Zengzi was slightly startled. The reason is very simple. Lu Yongchang did not sell out and explained straightforwardly. Currently our technology is not developed enough. Not only that, but we are not given enough time to develop. Interstellar travel is extremely long. With a population of 8 billion in the world, if not all of us, we have to bring at least half of them with us. Lu Yongchang said solemnly, this is a guarantee for future productivity and technological inheritance. With a population of several billion, coupled with the consumption of hundreds of years, let alone 15 years, even if we were given 50 years, we would not be able to build such an exaggerated spaceship. Therefore, we need a hibernation life-sustaining capsule that can provide nutrition, protection, and all necessary supplies, except for the necessary security personnel. The vast majority of people enter the starship and immediately begin hibernating for hundreds of years. Mao Zengzi nodded thoughtfully. I probably understand what you mean. This technology is not difficult. I can provide you with a solution now. In the laboratory, a white mouse was injected with a standard dose of hibernating hormone and then placed in a glass container. The purified hibernine is so powerful that in just a few seconds, the mice entered a state of suspended death. Subsequently, Mao Zengzi injected the light yellow deep sea liquid into it and then opened the filtration and purification device connected to the container. The instrument is started in the deep sea. Fluid begins to circulate. Well, now we just need to add some nutrients to it to meet your requirements. As for the hibernation life support cabin you mentioned, we only need to modify the filtration and purification device and design it into a box-shaped container. There was a hint of suspicion in Lu Yongchang's eyes. Is it that simple? Is the 20% gap in the technology tree system just a problem of container design? Just wait and see, he said in a deep voice. My intuition tells me that it won't be that simple. Obviously, things are not as simple as Mao Zengzi thought. At first, everything went smoothly. The white mouse lay quietly in the solution, like a corpse soaked in formalin solution. But more than an hour later, something changed. Academician Mao, the face of a researcher responsible for monitoring the vital signs of the mice, changed. The vital signs of the mice are declining rapidly. The heartbeat stopped too. Get it out quickly. Mao Zengzi's expression changed drastically, and he quickly stood up from the seat beside him and ordered. After some tossing, Mao Zengzi announced the result with an ugly expression. Professor Lu failed. The guinea pig is dead. Lu Yongchang sighed slightly. Sure enough, this thing is not that simple. Let's do an autopsy first to see what's going on. Professor, the autopsy results are out. Mao Zengzi walked up to Lu Yongchang holding a report with a strange look on his face. The mice died from lack of oxygen. Hearing this, Lu Yongchang suddenly froze in place. Lack of oxygen. Is there something wrong with the deep sea fluid? Or is there something wrong with the filtration and purification device? Mao Zengzi shook his head. We checked, and there is no problem with either. The problem is with the mouse. During the autopsy, we found that there was basically no deep sea fluid in the mouse's lungs. Speaking of this, Mao Zengzi patted his head with annoyance. I should have thought of it earlier. After this mouse entered the hibernation state, the breathing frequency and strength decreased by an unknown amount. It was fine when breathing air, but it was a problem when it was switched to deep sea fluid. LV Yongchang's expression was a little gloomy. Now, it's back to the original problem. The density of the liquid is too high, and humans, or creatures, cannot breathe this liquid. But now, this problem is getting more serious in the deep hibernation state. The breathing strength approaches 0 point, unless the density of the deep sea fluid is like air. Otherwise, this problem cannot be solved. But does this liquid really exist? Chapter 157. As the question was raised, the atmosphere between the two gradually became tense. After a long silence, Mao Zengzi breathed out gently and shook his head vigorously. The direction is wrong. We should not start with deep sea fluids. With deep sea liquids that are about the same density as air, this is almost impossible to achieve. Yongchang didn't speak, just nodded silently. He raised his head and looked at the white mouse with several tubes inserted into its body and quietly sinking in the light yellow deep sea liquid. Gradually, his demise gradually brightened. You say, Lu, Yongchang said in a slightly deeper voice, why don't we directly insert the catheter into the lungs, just like a gastric tube? Deep sea fluid is directly injected into the lungs of hibernating mice, and then the exchange of deep sea fluid is assisted by a catheter. Mao Zengzi's eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. He stretched out his hand, slapped his thigh hard, and said with a slightly excited expression, that makes sense. Since they can't inhale deep sea liquid after hibernation, can't we just pour it in directly? As he spoke, he stood up excitedly and walked to the experimental table. The laboratory is rich in equipment, and it didn't take long for a small tube similar to a gastric tube to appear in front of Lu Yongchang's eyes, different from a simple stomach tube. Considering that the lung tissue is relatively fragile and the organism has two left and right lungs, the end of the main duct of the pulmonary duct is divided into two slender ducts. After the equipment was completed, new problems arose again. Unlike the gastric tube, the insertion of the lung tube is obviously countless times more difficult. For one thing, the airways in the lungs are intricate. Lung tissue, on the other hand, is extremely fragile. Therefore, it took the experimenters a lot of time just to insert the lung tube into the lungs of the hibernating mice. After inserting the lung tube and connecting it to the machine, Mao Zengzi carefully placed the mouse that had entered deep hibernation into a glass container filled with deep sea fluid. After confirming that all operations were correct, Mao Zengzi breathed a sigh of relief and reached out to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Okay, there shouldn't be any problems now, he said with a relaxed look. Professor, this deep sea fluid should be used together with hibernation. Huh? Lu Yongchang was stunned and asked subconsciously, why do you say that, Mao Zengzi smiled bitterly. Professor Lu, you have never seen a white mouse put into deep sea liquid. Breathing liquid is against biological instinct, so the initial process of inhaling deep sea liquid is extremely painful. Hibernation technology perfectly solves this problem. I have to say that, although this plan is a bit simple and crude, it does play a certain role. Unlike the fate of the previous mouse, this one spent several days and nights in the pale yellow deep sea liquid unharmed. It seems it was successful this time. Even Lu Yongchang felt relieved when he looked at the stable vital signs data. Now, the question we need to consider is how to intubate quickly. It can't be that when it's applied to people, several doctors will be needed to intubate it, right? Hearing this question, Mao Zengzi showed a bit of embarrassment on his face. That's right. At present, the difficulty of intubation seems to be the only disadvantage of this plan. Is it okay to let Zero do the operation? Mao Zengzi subconsciously looked at the camera on the side. The next moment, a holographic projection appeared. Zero's image is still that of a gentleman in a suit, academician. Mao, at present, my computing power is not enough to support the intubation of billions of people at the same time. Besides, even if I were to perform the operation, the entire intubation process would take more than 10 minutes. Mao Zengzi nodded thoughtfully. Intubation time of more than 10 minutes is not a big problem. After all, after entering deep hibernation, the oxygen carried in the human blood is enough to sustain consumption for several hours. It means that if the computing power allows, this operation can be realized. As he said this, Mao Zengzi turned his attention to Lu Yongchang for help. Lu Yongchang, facing Mao Zengzi's eyes full of clear words, he silently shook his head. The Third generation quantum computer technology is still in the development process, and I haven't heard any good news from Academician MO recently. Hey. Mao Zengzi sighed with disappointment. Just as Lu Yongchang and Mao Zengzi were about to continue discussing the intubation plan, Zero's voice suddenly sounded. Professor, something happened to that little white mouse. When the two hurried back to the laboratory, the white mouse had already been placed on the dissecting table by the researchers. What's going on? As soon as he entered the door, Mao Zengzi asked hurriedly, Academician Mao, the mice still died of hypoxia. A researcher said with a heavy expression. Lack of oxygen. Is the lung tube useless? Facing Mao Zengzi's inquiry, the researcher just shook his head silently. We are also checking the specific reasons. The data has just been uploaded to the server. It is estimated that it will take some time to get the analysis results. Perhaps because of another failure, the atmosphere in the laboratory seemed particularly heavy. Every researcher stood quietly, with his head lowered, waiting for Mao Zengzi's order. LV Yongchang, who sensed that the atmosphere was not right, did not speak, but walked slowly to the disemboweled mouse, and examined it carefully. Peculiar bleeding under the pulmonary serosa and epicardium. Typical features of death by suffocation. Where is the pulmonary duct? LV Yongchang suddenly asked the researcher beside him. Faced with LV Yongchang's sudden question, the researcher was stunned, and then quickly pointed his finger. It's probably in this area. LV Yongchang frowned slightly. So short, Professor. LV, there is no way. The lung tissue is too fragile. We can only lower the pulmonary duct to this extent. Looking at the yellowish liquid remaining in the mouse's lungs, LV Yongchang said in a deep voice, take a sample of the residual liquid in the lungs to check the oxygen content. Also, Zero, model the lung structure of the mouse. LV Yongchang's voice was like a shot of cardiotonic to the laboratory that was originally a little depressed. In just a few minutes, all the researchers returned to their posts and began the inspection work according to his instructions. Chapter 158 Nanoroboot Technology. Professor, the modeling is complete. Zero's electronic synthesized sound sounded from the side, and at the same time, a blue holographic projection appeared in front of everyone. The lung structure of the mouse is clearly shown on the projection. Zero, add the lung tube. The location is at these two places. As he spoke, Lu Yongchang stretched out his hand and made a virtual point in the air. The next moment, two lung tubes appeared in the lung model, simulating deep sea fluid injection scenarios. In the holographic projection, deep sea fluid passes through the lung ducts and is slowly injected into the mouse's lungs, gradually filling the entire lungs. Stop. The moment the mouse's lungs were filled with deep sea fluid, Lu Yongchang suddenly said, Zero, simulate the flow of deep sea fluid near the alveoli in detail. The picture in the holographic projection quietly enlarged, and the dense alveolar structure of the mouse's lungs appeared in front of him. Looking at the state of the deep sea liquid in it, Lu Yongchang murmured to himself, sure enough, brother Mao, look, although the lung tubes are constantly injecting fresh deep sea fluid, it can only replace the part of the fluid near the lung tubes. It cannot help circulate the deep sea fluid in the alveoli. Mao Zengzi walked quickly to Lu Yongchang and observed carefully. Professor Lu, the test results are out. The researcher's voice came from the side. The oxygen content of the deep sea fluid near the alveoli is about 50% lower than the oxygen content of normal deep sea fluid. The test results undoubtedly verified the Zero simulation results. Mao Zengzi's eyes dimmed for a moment. It's a pity. The lung tube is of no use. It's not useless. At least it's in the right direction. Lu Yongchang smiled and patted Mao Zengzi on the shoulder. It's just that we may have to redesign a lung tube. To be precise, we need to insert the lung tube deeper, preferably to reach the alveoli. Impossible. Mao Zengzi shook his head repeatedly. The structure of the lungs is too complex. The average diameter of adult alveoli is only 0.2 millimeters. Coupled with the complex terminal bronchioles, no catheter can be inserted into them. Lu Yongchang did not speak, but frowned and looked at the holographic projection in front of him. trying to find a solution point. After thinking for a long time without finding the answer, he could only sit back in his chair, pretending to rest, and close his eyes in the fluorescent green system space. Linear technology trees stood quietly in the void point after Yongchang took a deep breath. He focused on the slightly dim cursor. A familiar feeling of dizziness came over at the same time. A tip appeared in his mind. Point nanorobotics technology. After receiving the prompt, Yongchang quickly separated his consciousness from the system space point. After opening his eyes, his first reaction was to raise his wrist to check the time point. It didn't take long. It only took about 5 minutes. He breathed a sigh of relief, endured the waves of dizziness deep in his brain, stood up and said to Mao Zengxi standing aside, "Brother Mao, I have an idea. Nanobots. Do you understand them?" A month later, inside the main laboratory point on a clean and tidy experimental table lies a silver white instrument. 0. Start the instrument and see the effect. The moment he said these words, Yongchang's eyes showed a bit of nervousness. "Yes, Professor." The electronic synthesized sound sounded, and the indicator light on the silver white instrument lit up. Point at first, nothing seemed to change in the instrumentation point, but soon, a small white substance appeared above the instrument point. As time went by, there was more and more white material, and finally it grew into a tube of more than 10 centimeters. 15 minutes. Yongchang frowned slightly. "It's still a bit slow, Professor. This is only the first generation of technology, and there is still a lot of room for improvement." 0 reminded thoughtfully. "That's true, Yongchang laughed loudly and reached out to pick up the silver white instrument on the experimental table. After looking at it carefully, he said, "0, make a few finished products, and let's try the effect." Biology. Sub-laboratory point. Mao Zengxi stared blankly at the video in front of him that had been accelerated several times. Yongchang explained carefully with a smile on his face. A large number of nanorobots, under Zero's control, form a conduit that can be freely customized in shape. With Zero control, this catheter can open holes anywhere in real time and perfectly conform to the organism's lung structure. In this way, we can accurately deliver deep sea fluid to each alveoli of hibernating organisms. As Yongchang finished speaking, the accelerated video ended. Then, how to take it out, perhaps? He was shocked by the sci-fi scene in front of him, so Mao Zengxi asked a slightly stupid question in a daze. Yongchang chuckled. "Since these nanorobots can form conduits, they can naturally be decomposed and reformed into the form of nanorobots. It's useless to talk more. Just try it and see the effect." As he spoke, he took out a small silver white instrument from his pocket and handed it to Mao Zengxi, who was dazed at the sight. "Here, the nanorobots inside should be just enough for a white mouse to use." A white mouse that had been injected with hibernation and fell into a state of suspended animation lay sprawled on the experimental table. "What should I do?" Mao Zengxi, holding the silver white instrument, swallowed slightly and asked Yongchang nervously, "Are there any preparations needed?" Yongchang laughed dumbly and pointed to the tip of the mouse's nose. "Just point it at the nose and put it there. Try to get closer. If you put it too far, the amount of nanorobots may not be enough." The silver white instrument was placed at the tip of the mouse's nose. Perhaps because of Yongchang's reminder just now, Mao Zengxi pressed it tightly against the mouse's nose. 0. Start. Got it. The indicator light on the surface of the silver white instrument lit up quietly. Hundreds of millions of nanorobots swarmed out from the front opening, stacking up continuously to form a thin and long catheter. Watching the white lung tube slowly penetrate the tip of the mouse's nose, Yongchang explained softly, "Considering that this is something used in the lungs, I specifically used a softer material, coupled with the emergency procedures. Even if the lung tube is pulled hard, after it is formed, it will not cause too much damage." Looking at the white lung tube, Mao Zengxi subconsciously rubbed his itchy nose tip and asked in a deep voice, "How long does this process take?" "It takes about half an hour at present. After the technology is improved, it may be accelerated to about 10 minutes. Of course, the ultimate goal is definitely to complete this series of operations in tens of seconds or seconds." Chapter 159 Hibernation Chamber and Medical Chamber. Half an hour later, Professor, the construction of the lung tube has been completed. Zero's voice sounded in the quiet laboratory, and all the researchers looked at the experimental table. A long white tube stretched out from the nose of the sleeping mouse. LV Yongchang was refreshed, and turned to Mao Zengzi and said, "Brother Mao, hurry up and take an X-ray to see the effect." A few minutes later, in the X-ray photo on the computer screen, the lungs of the mouse were filled with fine and dense lung tubes. "Unbelievable," Mao Zengzi exclaimed from the bottom of his heart. "What is the production of this nanorocket?" Suddenly, as if he realized something, he turned his head to look at Lu Yongchang and said in a very hurried tone, "Also, how to power it? Can it work for a long time?" The production. This is a bit difficult to estimate. Under Zero's control, it can replicate itself. It only needs to provide the necessary materials and sufficient electricity. The power supply method is wireless power supply and bioenergy power supply. Wireless power supply is used outside the body, and glucose fuel cells are used inside the body. Mao Zengzi took a breath of cold air. Self-replication. This output is really hard to estimate. 1 makes 2, 2 makes 4, 4 makes 8. If it is given enough resources and time, this thing can easily consume all the resources on Earth. What are you going to do? LV Yongchang frowned and asked in a low voice. "I'll tell you in advance, this thing is very dangerous. Don't use it casually. It's okay with Zero's control, but if something unexpected happens, this thing will cause a disaster. Besides, I plan to use it on the latest starship." Hearing this, Mao Zengzi fell silent. Used on the latest starship, then this nanorobot can indeed be called a top secret technology. It's just thinking of the scene in his mind just now. Mao Zengzi asked unwillingly, if its performance is reduced, can it be used for civilian purposes? For example, remove the ability to replicate itself. LV Yongchang frowned. "Tell me what you are going to do first." Mao Zengzi pointed to the design of the hibernation cabin on the holographic projection next to him. It's similar to the hibernation cabin, the medical cabin in science fiction movies, with nanorobots with specific functions. Many diseases can be treated with the help of medical cabins. Regular, full body examinations, early cancerous tissue resection, targeted drugs for diseased tissues, precise disinfection of bacteria and viruses. There are too many scenarios that can be applied. Once this technology matures, the average life expectancy of humans can at least be increased to over 90 years old. Looking at the excited Mao Zengzi in front of him, LV Yongchang fell silent. Since his rebirth, he has not paid much attention to this aspect. The urgency of the solar crisis made him subconsciously promote the necessary technology, thus ignoring the application scenarios of these technologies. He took a deep breath and reached out to pat Mao Zengzi's shoulder. "The medical cabin will be left to your laboratory. As for the nanorobots, I will castrate and transform them to a certain extent." 2 weeks later, the hibernating mouse immersed in deep sea fluid is still in good health. This also symbolizes the official breakthrough of the basic technology of the hibernation cabin. At the same time as the gorilla experiment began, the design work of the first human hibernation cabin also began. Cough. Cough cough. Academician Lin, please take a rest. In the quantum computer electronic laboratory, a researcher stood hunched over beside a gray-haired old man, patting the old man's back with his hand, and tried his best to persuade him. "Your body is like this. It's not too late to take a rest." Before completing this architecture diagram, the old man coughed weakly twice again. A vague voice came from the oxygen mask. "No, I can just sit and rest. Lie down for a while." The researcher looked at the increasingly dim light in the old man's eyes, and his heart seemed to be grabbed by a big hand. "It's just the last bit. Lie down for a while." The researcher pointed to the simple bed on the side. "Look, the bed is behind you. I'll help you to rest for a while." The old man waved his hand weakly again, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth and said, I dare not lie down. I'm afraid that if I lie down, I will never get up again." As he said, the old man reached out and tapped the keyboard gently again. "How is Mr. Lin?" Just when the researcher was extremely anxious and didn't know what to do, Mo Zhang's voice came from the side. "Academician. Mo. The researcher seemed to have found the backbone and quickly ran to Mo Xiang. Academician Mo. Mr. Lin still refuses to rest. Mo. Xiang walked quickly to Academician Lin Hongsheng point the moment he saw the old man's face. His heart trembled violently a few times. The haggard face, slightly pale and trembling lips, only the eyes still burst out with amazing brilliance. Mr. Lin, you need to rest. Mo Xiang said in a deep voice. You can't stand it. If you are like this, Zhao. Mo, you are here. Hearing Mo Xiang's voice, the old man's lips trembled. I told them not to bother you. Hey, they didn't listen. Mr. Lin. The old man's tone made Mo Xiang's heart tighten. Little. Mo, don't stop me. The old man took a breath and coughed a few times again. I know my body. The third generation quantum computer is very important to us. I only need to finish this part of the architecture. Just let me finish it. As he said, the old man started typing on the computer again. Professor, something happened with Academician Mo. LV. Yongchang, who was checking the design drawings, was startled by the sudden sound of 0. He frowned and raised his head to look at the holographic projection in front of him, and asked with a slightly dissatisfied tone, what's going on, Professor? Academician Lin Hongsheng seems. Zero's tone did not fluctuate at all, and he quickly explained point at the same time. The video in the quantum computer sub-laboratory was played in front of him. Point late stage lung cancer. Seeing Zero's report, LV Yongchang fell silent. Point he raised his hand to cover his eyes and sighed softly. Point, although he had experienced countless separations and deaths in his previous life, he still couldn't bear to see such a scene. Point no. It shouldn't be like this. He suddenly dropped his hand that was covering his eyes and looked at the design drawing in front of him, which had been checked for 90%. It's a gamble. 0. Focus on making the hibernation chamber. I allow you to stop any other manufacturing work in half an hour. I want to see it appear in the quantum computer sub-laboratory. Zero's calm voice sounded. Professor, the production has begun, and the current progress is 60%. LV. Yongchang was slightly stunned and quickly stood up from his chair. Okay, you should know what to do next. I'll go to the quantum computer sub-laboratory now. Chapter 160 The Last Glory. Quantum computer sub-laboratory. Point seeing Mr. Lin stretching out his fingers and tapping the keyboard with difficulty. Everyone's eyes showed some reluctance. Point Mo Xiang slightly opened his lips, but did not say anything. Point at this point, all the researchers present have already known. Point this is probably the last bit of brilliance that Mr. Lin can emit. Point the sound of keyboard tapping echoed in the silent laboratory. Slowly and firmly, the keyboard tapping sound suddenly stopped. Point everyone was startled and looked at the old man. Point a vague voice came from the oxygen mask. Point Mo Xiang quickly leaned over and leaned towards Mr. Lin. Mr. Lin, what did you say? Where are my glasses? Mr. Lin's weak voice came from the oxygen mask. Why can't I see clearly? Hearing this, Mo Xiang couldn't control his emotions immediately. Point he secretly wiped away his tears and choked. Mr. Lin, the glasses are on your nose. Mr. Lin didn't speak, but squinted his eyes slightly and tapped the keyboard again. Point soon after, Elder Lin's voice sounded again. Ahem. The architecture diagram has been completed. Upon hearing this, Mo Xiang's eyes suddenly soured, and a line of hot tears flowed out of them. Okay. Mo Xiang wiped the hot tears on his face with his hand and nodded with sobs. Help me save it. Elder Lin's voice became more and more vague. Point Mo Xiang nodded, squatted down hurriedly, and manipulated the mouse to save the file in the computer. Seeing the prompt of successful saving, Elder Lin slowly exhaled a breath of turbid air, as if he had put down his worries, and the whole person was relieved. Point his eyes passed over the computer in front of him and looked into the void, and his slightly turbid eyes suddenly shone with some brilliance. What a pity. I won't see the moment when the third generation quantum computer is completed. Bang. The loud noise of the door being pushed open interrupted Mo Xiang's words that he originally wanted to comfort Elder Lin. Point a group of researchers turned their heads to look in the direction of the sound. Point two robotic arms carrying a silver white rectangular machine walked into the gate. Point following closely, a young figure appeared in front of everyone. Professor Lu. Mo Xiang was stunned and exclaimed, "Why are you here, Lu?" Yongchang glanced at Academician Lin Hongsheng, who was sitting on a chair and wearing a breathing mask. When he saw the grey face and closed eyes, his heart trembled. "Don't talk nonsense," Lu Yongchang shouted. "Help Mr. Lin over." As Lu Yongchang's voice fell, two robotic arms gently placed the hibernation chamber on the ground. As for Mozang, although he didn't know what Lu Yongchang was going to do, he subconsciously moved according to what he said. When Mozang brought academician Lin Hongsheng, who had fallen into a coma, over, Lu Yongchang had already opened the lid of the hibernation chamber with the help of the robotic arm. "Hurry. Put Mr. Lin in," Lu Yongchang ordered in a hurried tone. At this time, Mozang knew that the situation was urgent. Even though he was extremely confused, he did not ask a single question and directly put Lin Leo into the hibernation chamber. The hibernation chamber was very large. In other words, Lin Leo was very thin and only occupied 60% of the space in the hibernation chamber. 0. Inject hibernation hormone, LV. Yongchang said in a deep voice. The dose can be slightly larger, and Lin Leo's metabolic rate must be reduced to the lowest. 2. Mechanical arms on the side lifted the lid of the hibernation chamber and placed it on the hibernation chamber. Because of the hasty production, many unnecessary parts were omitted. Just like this hibernation chamber lid, it was designed to be opened and closed automatically, but now it can only be opened and closed manually. A snap sound sounded, and the hibernation chamber entered a sealed state. Through the transparent glass above the cover, LV Yongchang and Mozang clearly saw a needle of transparent medicine being injected into Lin Leo's body. In just a few seconds, the pain on Lin Leo's face gradually eased. The heart rate displayed on the display screen on the surface of the hibernation chamber also began to drop rapidly. The next moment, a mask fell, covering Lin's mouth and nose in all directions. After all the protective measures were completed, a puff of white mist rose in the hibernation cabin. "This is a simple disinfection work," LV Yongchang explained softly. After the disinfection work was completed, the mask was retracted, and a large amount of light yellow liquid emerged in the cabin, wrapping up Lin's body. "This?" Mozang looked anxious and turned his head to look at LV Yongchang beside him. LV Yongchang naturally ignored Mozang, but stared at Lin's face through the transparent glass of the cabin cover with full concentration. After seeing a little white substance slowly growing towards Lin's nose, he breathed a sigh of relief. He straightened up and looked at Mozang beside him. "Hibernation cabin technology can allow people to enter a hibernation state similar to suspended animation." Zhang quickly understood what LV Yongchang said. He looked at the hibernation chamber filled with yellowish liquid with a surprised look on his face and muttered to himself, "When did this new technology come out?" LV Yongchang shrugged. "Just a while ago, to be precise. This hibernation chamber was manufactured less than 10 minutes ago." Zhang, don't worry. Although human experiments have not been conducted yet, it has been successful in gorillas and mice. Zhang looked even more strange when he heard this. How can he be at ease? "Professor Lu, are you sure that nothing will happen if people use this thing?" He carefully looked at academician Lin, who was pale and submerged in the pale yellow liquid. He suddenly shuddered. "It looks like a corpse soaked in formalin. There shouldn't be any problem," Lu Yongchang said softly. "Even if there is a problem, what difference does it make to academician Lin?" Zhang was stunned for a moment and nodded bitterly. "Yes, for Mr. Lin at present, the results of both are the same. It's better to try this last hope. So, Professor Lu, are you planning to let Mr. Lin hibernate in the future and use future medical technology for treatment?" LV Yongchang nodded and shook his head. "Hibernation is indeed just a delaying tactic. As for treatment, there is no need to rely on future medical technology. Let me introduce you to the research project being conducted at the biological sublaboratory, the medical cabin technology. Through nanorobots, the diseased parts inside the human body are directly treated and then combined with other treatment methods, such as organ transplantation. I believe it won't take long for Elder Lin to wake up from the hibernation cabin." Chapter 161, The Beginning of the Disaster. 2032.8 Lu Yongchang looked at the holographic projection calendar on his desk and sighed slightly. "It's so fast." He sighed softly, then turned to look at the sky outside the window. There was not a single cloud in the blue sky, just the blazing sun. The solar mutation has progressed to this point, and ordinary people on the earth can detect something strange even without observing it through astronomical means. The weather is getting hotter. The reason is also very simple. The sun enters the aging period, and due to the massive consumption of hydrogen, the core of the sun becomes smaller. The decrease in hydrogen content causes a solar core to be further compressed. The hydrogen fusion in the core becomes more and more intense, and the energy released becomes more powerful. In just 2 years, the average temperature of the earth has risen by 2 degrees. It's just a small 2 times, but it has a huge impact on the human living environment. All kinds of extreme weather began to appear: wildfires, floods, melting glaciers, rising sea levels. Countless low-altitude coastal cities were submerged, and as for some island countries, needless to say, zero. Calculate the temperature increase trend during this period. Receive, as the electronic synthesizer sounded, a colorful holographic projection appeared above the desk in front of Yongchang. After the breakthrough of the second generation holographic projection technology, the originally blue holographic projection finally gained color. Looking at the rising slope of the curve, Yongchang sighed slightly. It's getting faster. Zero said nothing, but quietly presented the temperature growth curve in front of Yongchang. After a moment of silence, Yongchang spoke again. Zero, what stage of development has the sun reached now? The holographic projection screen changes instantly. A round fireball glowing with crimson flames appeared in front of his eyes. This is a live picture from 8 minutes ago, Professor. It is completely consistent with your prediction model. The sun is currently aging at an unprecedented rate. Several curves appeared next to the fireball. According to your model predictions, the sun's aging rate will increase rapidly in the next 3 to 6 months, and it will officially enter the red giant stage 2 years later. Yongchang's eyes moved slightly. 2 years later, that is, August 2034. Zero. Calculate the change in the Earth's temperature in the next year. A steep curve appeared in front of him. Looking at the temperature displayed above, Yongchang's expression darkened slightly. Really, the situation in the previous life happened after all. The global average temperature will rise by 20 degrees, and the temperature in some areas will rise to over 70 degrees. Such temperatures mean that most areas around the world are no longer suitable for habitation. In their last life, they chose to build underground cities to escape the high temperatures this life. Zero. Ask Fang Zhu to come to my office. Yongchang, are you looking for me? Just as Yongchang was in a daze facing the holographic projection on his desk, the office door quietly opened, and Fang Zhu's voice came from the door. Yes. Yongchang came back to his senses, reached out and grabbed it in the air, and then made a throwing motion towards Fang Zhu. Look, this is the simulation data for the next 3 to 6 months. The holographic projection originally on the desk instantly shrank, flied in front of Fang Zhu, and expanded again. Fang Zhu was not surprised at all by such a sci-fi scene. He was minding his own business, and said hello to the robot on the side. Zero. Make me a cup of tea. After finishing speaking, he sat on the chair and looked at the data. 20 degrees Celsius. Fang Zhu exclaimed. Are you sure there was no miscalculation of zero? Academician. Fang, please believe in my ability. Before Yongchang could speak, Ling's voice sounded from the robotic arm on the side. Afterwards, a cup of tea was delivered to Fang Zhu. Fang Zhu sneered, reached out to take the teacup, thanked him and quickly asked Yongchang. Yongchang, do you know what it means for the average temperature to rise by 20 degrees Celsius? Of course I know. Yongchang reached out and pinched his eyebrows and whispered, the sea level will rise about 60 meters, not to mention other disasters. The living space alone will be compressed a lot. That's why I called you here. We need to determine a plan. Fang Zhu raised his eyebrows. Determine a plan? Do you think you have several other plans? Yongchang nodded silently. The Tower of Babel should be built soon, right? A proud smile suddenly appeared on Fang Zhu's face. Thanks to Academician Mo, they successfully launched the 3rd generation quantum computer. The power of 2 million qubits is really exaggerated. It is estimated that the Tower of Babel will be officially completed in a few days. By the way, you haven't seen it live, right? That scene. TSK. There will be opportunities in the future. Yongchang breathed a long sigh of relief. This is the best news I heard today. Get ready to launch the Spaceport plan. The Luaneo series of starships should also be put on the agenda. Hearing this, Fang Zhu's eyes gradually became filled with doubts. Do you mean to start the Heaven plan in advance? Our current technical reserves should not be enough to support interstellar navigation, right? Yongchang shook his head and said, of course not. The main purpose of the Luan bird starship is immigration. Immigration? Fang Zhu suddenly realized. You mean Mars, right? LV. Yongchang waved his hand in the air. 0. Give me the solar system map. The colorful holographic projection instantly enlarged and filled the entire office. Point then, the solar system map appeared. Point among them. The fiery red sun occupied most of the space in the holographic projection point, although they knew that this thing had no effect on reality. Looking at the huge fireball, the two still swallowed slightly. 0. Make the sun smaller. There is no need to present it 1:1. Quote as LV Yongchang's words fell. The fireball that occupied most of the two people's sight shrank instantly. Look, this is the Earth. LV Yongchang pointed to a blue planet in front of him. In 2 years, the sun will officially enter the red giant stage. According to calculations, from August 2034 to 2045, in these 11 years, the sun will gradually expand and swallow Mercury and Venus. Among them, according to Zero's calculations, in 2040, the sun will completely swallow Mercury. In 2045, the sun swallowed Venus. In the same year, the sun will explode with a helium flash. The holographic image also changed synchronously, and the projection of the fireball symbolizing the sun became larger and larger, swallowing Mercury and Venus step by step. Point the original blue planet became a veritable fireball. Point a flash of white light passed, and an extremely ugly lava ball appeared in front of the 2. Looking at this simulated scene, Fang Zhu subconsciously took a step back. Chapter 162. Take 5 billion first. Actually, there's no need to go that far. Yongchang shrugged and waved his hand at the huge sun projection next to him, shrinking it to its original state. As long as 2034, the surface of the Earth will be uninhabitable for human survival. As for solutions, I can think of 2 at the moment. The first one is to quickly create a spaceport with the help of space elevators and Zeros. Build giant starships on spaceports that could accommodate millions or tens of millions of people. Fang Zhu interrupted Yongchang's words directly. This is impossible. A starship that allows millions or tens of millions of people to live is definitely not a technology we currently have. Listen to me first. Yongchang said helplessly. When did I say that I would let these people live in it? You. Fang Zhu's breath suddenly suffocated. Point in just a few seconds, he reacted. You mean the hibernation cabin? Yongchang smiled and nodded. I'll give you a simple calculation. The current standard hibernation cabin is 2.5 meters in length, 1 meter in width, and 1 meters in height. Let's regard it as a rectangular parallelepiped. So, a standard hibernation chamber occupies approximately 2.5 cubic meters of volume. We assume transporting 10 million people. If we calculate it in the simplest way, we only need a cubic space with a side length of 293 meters to accommodate them all, taking into account various redundant equipment, maintenance robots and some necessary power equipment. After Zero calculations, a starship with a length of about 800 meters can successfully transport 10 million people, and this starship doesn't need any extra performance. Yongchang raised his eyebrows slightly. When necessary, it can just be an ion shell equipped with an engine and some maintenance supplies. In the plan, Zero needs to build more than 500 such starships and take away 5 billion people first. Of the remaining 5 billion, after filtering out those who are not suitable for interstellar travel, those who died naturally, those who are too old, those who are unstable, etc., there will probably be 500 million left. Facing Yongchang's description, Fang Zhu swallowed again. Then Where are you going to let these tin shells go, Lu? Yongchang silently reached out and pointed to a location in the solar system, the Kuiper belt. In other words, these 5 billion people are equivalent to starting a few years earlier than us. With the help of weak artificial intelligence and hibernation capsules, these 5 billion people can spend at least 50 years near the Kuiper belt safely. As for what to do in 50 years, Lu Yongchang's eyes suddenly dimmed a bit. If we can't catch up with them in the next 50 years, then humanity will basically be doomed. As for the remaining 500 million people, as necessary labor force and scientific researchers, I will arrange them in the spaceport. Wait until the technology matures and the spacecraft for interstellar navigation is completed, and then we can start escaping from the solar system. What about the second solution? Fang Zhu suddenly asked. Tell me about the second solution first. Mars. Immigration. Lu Yongchang said succinctly. After the sun expands, we can use Mars as a springboard to gain more development time. After acquiring enough resources in the solar system, we can then proceed to interstellar navigation. After all, the power of a helium flash cannot affect the entire solar system. It's just I'm not sure how much computing power Zero needs to complete this large-scale immigration plan. Moreover, the problem of material consumption is also a big problem. The office fell into silence again, leaving only a few holographic projections of planets slowly orbiting in the sky. Fang Zhu was silent for a moment, then slowly said, why not combine them? The next day. A very remote mountain village. Hey, the weather is getting hotter and hotter. A gray-haired old man, wearing a white sweatshirt as in previous years, sat under the shade of a tree in front of his home, shaking his bamboo fan and fanning himself. Useless at a high temperature of 40 degrees Celsius. Even the wind is scalding hot. Uncle Key, are you still enjoying the cool under the shade of the trees? A girl dressed as a junior high school student opened the window, stuck her head out and shouted, we can't enjoy the cool weather like this now. You can come and sit at my house. It has air conditioning. Following the girl's shout, a powerful shout rang out. Old Key, come on. I'm waiting for you to play chess with me. Facing the neighbor's invitation, Uncle Key smiled and slapped his bamboo fan, stood up and walked towards the next door. As soon as I opened the door, a blast of cold air hit my face. After walking into the house, an old man with the same gray hair was sitting at the table with a chessboard in front of him. He waved to him. Come on, Leo Key, we haven't played chess for several days. Uncle Key shuddered slightly. Say, Leo Zhang, your air conditioner is on all day long, doesn't it use electricity? When Uncle Zhang heard this, he was slightly startled and then burst into laughter. I told you, Leo Key, to watch more news on weekdays, but you didn't listen. Since last year, this electricity has become worthless, thanks to Professor Nalu. After the fusion technology comes out, this electricity will be like free. Uncle Key smiled bitterly and shook his head. I'm old and can't keep up with the times. It's gotten hotter and hotter in the past 2 years. It wasn't so hot before. Oh, by the way, your granddaughter is in school now. Do you know what's going on? Hearing this, Grandpa Zhang turned his head and looked at the girl next to him. Zio man, do you know what's going on? I'm also wondering about this weather. Zhang man frowned and said, it should be because of the sun. Our teacher said. After some explanation, the two old men fell silent. Then, according to what you said, in a few years, the sun will explode? Grandpa Key smiled and shook his head, obviously not taking this to heart. Grandpa Key, I'm telling the truth. Zhang Man's face flushed slightly, and she whispered in defense, this is what our teacher just said, and it has been on TV for a long time. Okay. Grandpa Zhang smiled and responded, by the way, Zio man, go turn on the TV. Speaking of which, I haven't watched the news for a while. A few minutes later, according to the latest observation data from the first laboratory of the Human Union, the speed of solar anomalies has accelerated again. At present, the global average temperature has risen by 2 degrees Celsius. It is expected that in the next 3 to 6 months, the global average temperature will rise by 20 degrees Celsius again. At that time, the Earth will be unsuitable for human survival. The Noise in the living room stopped instantly. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Fallen Leaves return to their roots. The sound from the TV continued, according to the suggestions of Yongchang, the chief scientist of the People's Federation. The People's Federation will start the construction of the second large-scale space elevator project, codename Jianmu. Considering the large population of Eurasia, the construction site of the second space elevator, Jianmu, is located at the roof of the world in the former Xia Kingdom. At the same time, the People's Federation will simultaneously carry out an escape plan, and the plan requires. The living room was extremely quiet. Apart from the solemn voice of the host on the TV, the only sound left was the whirring of the air conditioner. For a long time. Uncle Key, who was wearing a white sweatshirt, tremblingly picked up the glass on the table and took a sip of the tea inside. As if he was awakened by his actions, Uncle Zhang across the table suddenly raised his head and asked him, Leo, Key, what are you going to do? What should I do? Uncle Key's hand holding the teacup trembled slightly, and the hot tea spilled on his lap. But he didn't seem to feel anything. He just put the teacup down silently, picked up the napkin on the side and wiped it. Leo, Key, the news said that citizens under the age of 65 can apply for the escape plan. How about you, Uncle? Key shook his head and turned to look out the window. Looking at the familiar scene, a bit of sadness flashed in his eyes. Forget it. He sighed deeply. Now that I'm old enough, I won't compete with young people. I am a rough man with no education. I have lived in this village since I was a child. According to the saying of the older generation, after this person dies, he will return to his roots. What about you, Leo Zhang? I remember you are 65 years old this year, right? When Zhang Man, who was sitting nearby, heard this, he immediately pricked up his ears and looked at his grandfather. Uncle Zhang chuckled and reached out to move a chess piece on the chessboard in front of him. I'm definitely staying here. How could you, an old man like you, be lonely without me, Grandpa? A hint of urgency flashed in Zhang Man's eyes. Although she was not very old, she could vaguely understand the conversation between the two. Xiaoman is good, Uncle. Zhang patted Zhang Man's head lovingly, chuckled and said, when your parents come back tonight, you can go to the city to sign up. Grandpa is old and can't walk anymore. Looking at the free and easy smiles on the faces of the two old men in front of him, Zhang Man's eyes suddenly became blurry. Night. After the sun went down, the temperature dropped a lot. But the air in the small mountain village is still a bit hot. In the living room, Zhang Man sat silently on the sofa without saying a word. As for Uncle Zhang, he sat next to Zhang Man with a wry smile on his face, trying to comfort his granddaughter. The sound of the security door opening came. Dad, a female voice said. What's wrong with Xiaoman? Hearing the woman's voice, Zhang Man, who was sitting silently on the sofa, jumped up suddenly, ran quickly to the door, and hugged the woman who was carrying a bit of heat. Mom. Zhang Man stretched out his hand to wipe the remaining tears on his face, and said with a hint of tears, Mom, Grandpa refuses to leave. Upon hearing her daughter's words, the woman stiffened suddenly. Dad, a man's voice rang out. You're so good, why don't you want to leave? It's been said on TV that in a few months, the average temperature of the earth will rise by 20 degrees. By then, no one will be able to live here at all. Facing the persuasion of his son and daughter-in-law, Uncle Zhang sighed slightly and said to the man, Bojan, you don't need to persuade me. I have already made up my mind. At my age, I don't need to bother anymore. Besides, I have Leo Key next door with me, so it doesn't matter to me. Tomorrow, take Xiaoman to the city to register. But, faced with his father's request to seek death, Zhang Bojan was obviously not very willing. He opened his mouth and prepared to continue persuading. Okay. The old man was a little annoyed. Stop trying to persuade me. Although I don't have much education, I know a little bit about it. Technology has not developed to this point yet. Sending 5 billion people out isn't easy. The old man's original calm expression had disappeared. His lips trembled, and his face looked slightly pale as he said, "My withdrawal will definitely increase the success rate of the escape plan, although it's not of much use, but I'm old and I've had enough. The rest of your life belongs to you. Live well." As he spoke, the old man patted his son's shoulder gently, took a deep look at the three of them, turned and walked towards the stairs. The stairlight was not on. "Dad." Zhang Bojun called softly with some choking point. The old man did not look back, but stepped down firmly and walked towards the darkness. Seeing his grandfather's figure completely disappearing into the darkness, Zhang Man couldn't bear it any longer and cried bitterly, "Grandpa, is Grandpa not leaving with us?" "Xiaoman, don't cry." The woman's eyes were red. She sniffed and squatted down to comfort her. "Grandpa just plans to stay with Grandpa Ki here." "I don't believe it." The teacher said that the earth is going to end. Zhang Man's cry became more and more sad. "If Grandpa doesn't leave, I won't leave either." Late at night, looking at Zhang Man lying on the sofa tired of crying, Zhang Bojun sighed slightly. "So, Nan, let's go now." Hearing Zhang Bojun's words, the woman's shoulders twitched slightly. "Now? Why are you in such a hurry?" Zhang Bojun turned his head to look at Zhang Man lying on the sofa, his face more worried. "You also saw Xiaoman like this. Who knows what will happen tomorrow?" "I think." At this point, Sunan already understood. She pursed her lips slightly, gently picked up Zhang Man on the sofa, and nodded to her husband. "Let's go say hello to Dad." The two walked up the stairs lightly. The light was on in the old man's room. "Who?" The voice of Mr. Zhang came. The next moment, the neatly dressed old man appeared in front of the two. Obviously, the old man didn't sleep either. "Dad, it's Sis," Zhang Bojun said in a low voice. "Xiaoman is asleep. We are going to take her away now, so as to avoid tomorrow." The old man nodded silently, staring at Zhang Man and Sunan's arms carefully. "Let me hug Xiaoman again." More than 10 minutes later, Zhang Bojun and Sunan walked out of their own rural self-built house. As for Zhang Man, she lay in Zhang Bojun's arms, with her head resting on his shoulder. The sound of the window opening came from behind. Zhang Bojun and Sunan trembled slightly. Their eyes were slightly red, but they did not look back, and walked straight forward. And Zhang Man, who was originally asleep, quietly opened her slightly red and swollen eyes, looking at the familiar figure in the window. A line of hot tears slowly slid down her cheeks. Chapter 164 Escape Plan Priority. When it was dawn, the three of them had already arrived at the nearest county seat. Although it was very early, there was a dense crowd outside the escape plan registration point. "Quiet, everyone. Be quiet. Come. One by one. Everyone can sign up." Hundreds of soldiers in military uniforms were holding guns and shouting to maintain order at the scene. Looking at the huge crowd of people in front of him, Zhang Man subconsciously took a step back. Growing up in the countryside, she had never seen such a chaotic scene. Facing such a crowded crowd, Zhang Bojun and Sunan quickly reached out to surround Zhang Man to prevent any accidents. "Hey, stop crowding." Sunan, who was pushed by the person next to her, shouted loudly, "Didn't I say that everyone can sign up?" Nan's voice was quickly drowned in the chaotic crowd. The next second, the crowd came again. Naturally, the strength of Sunan and Zhang Bojun could not compete with the crowd. Seeing that the couple were forced to separate, and that her daughter was about to be swallowed up by the crowd, Sunan's eyes were splitting, and she shouted heartbreakingly, "Be careful. Be careful, child." Bang. There was a loud gunshot. Then, the crowd suddenly stopped, and a burst of piercing screams came from everywhere. Bang, bang, bang. 3 gunshots were fired in succession. Like a cock being grabbed by the throat. The screams stopped instantly. "Quiet." A deep voice sounded. The chaotic flow of people completely stopped. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound. A tall and strong man put away the gun in his hand, walked up to Sunan, and asked in a deep voice, "Where is the child?" Mom. Zhang Man's voice came from the crowd. The next moment, under the gaze of the big man, the crowd automatically separated, making way for Zhang Man, who was squeezed deep in the crowd. Seeing that their daughter was safe and sound, Sunan and Zhang Bojin's expression suddenly relaxed. Sunan came to her senses and quickly turned to look at the soldier beside her. Thank you, facing Sunan's thanks, the big man smiled and waved his hand. It's okay. With that said, he faced everyone again. Everyone, follow the order and sign up one by one. Those who jump in line and disrupt order will be disqualified from fleeing. Nothing has as much weight as these words. After hearing that they might be disqualified from fleeing, everyone quickly and spontaneously formed a long line. All the soldiers were relieved to see order restored at the registration point. The soldier just now held Zhang Man's hand and walked to Sunan. After saluting, he asked in a deep voice, "Hello, what do you call me?" "Hello, my name is Sunan." Sunan replied hurriedly, "Hello, Miss Su, I'm Wu Pengxing, the person in charge here. What is the age of your child?" Sunan quickly reported a number. Hearing Sunan's answer, Wu Pengxing looked solemn, saluted again and said, "According to the escape plan, your child's age meets the regulations, and we can give her priority to go through the escape procedures." Hearing this, Sunan and Zhang Bojin suddenly showed a bit of joy on their faces. The two nodded in succession. Okay, please give her priority to go through the formalities. Thank you." While talking, the two of them bowed to Wu Pengxing. Wu Pengxing hurriedly stepped aside and then continued to explain, "There is something I must make clear to you. In the escape plan, children are the first priority, followed by senior talents from all walks of life. Then it will be the turn of the young and middle-aged workforce. Finally, there are some elderly, middle-aged and elderly people. So, when the escape plan begins, you and your children will be separated into two different starships." Hearing this, the original smile on Sunan's face disappeared instantly. What? This? She is still a child. If something happens. As she spoke, she looked at Zhang Bojin beside her. Faced with this situation, she couldn't make up her mind. Zhang Bojin took a deep breath and asked in a deep voice, "Sir, I only have one question. Is your child's starship the safest?" Wu Pengxing was silent for a moment and did not reply. He just nodded slightly. "Okay." Zhang Bojin gritted his teeth. "Sir, Zhang Man is leaving it to you." Wu Pengxing silently saluted the two of them again. "Let's talk for a while. I don't know when we'll see each other again." Wu Pengxing reminded softly. Sunan and Zhang Bojin hurriedly knelt down and pulled Zhang Man to their sides. "Xiaoman, if you follow Uncle Wu, he will take you to a safe place." As he spoke, Sunan raised her hand to wipe away her tears. Let alone the child, even she as an adult couldn't bear this kind of scene of life and death. Seeing Zhang Man turning back 3 times after Wu Pengxing, Sunan's eyes became moist again. "Bojin, tell me, can we still see Xiaoman?" She looked at the long queue in front of her and murmured to herself, "Yes." Zhang Bojin was silent for a while and said in a deep voice, "Humans will never fall here." The queue shortened little by little. Soon, it was Sunan and Zhang Bojin's turn. After reporting his identity information, the staff member behind the computer screen showed some doubts in his eyes. "Hello, Mr. Zhang. According to the data, your father Zhang Yunian meets the requirements for escape in terms of age and physical condition." Zhang Bojin replied calmly, "He gave up." Another one gave up. The staff showed some respect in his eyes and nodded to Zhang Bojin. "Thank you for your father's efforts. Humanity will remember him." As he said that, the staff quickly checked an option on the computer in front of him. "What do you mean?" Zhang Bojin asked with a puzzled look. "Have many people given up escaping?" The staff stopped the work in his hands and sighed softly. "Yes, according to current statistics, more than 80% of the 65-year-olds gave up the opportunity to escape, and the proportion of people aged 55 to 60 who gave up also reached 60%. They voluntarily stayed on Earth to reduce the burden of the escape plan and leave the hope of survival to the young." Zhang Bojin and his wife Sunan looked at each other. Both saw the shock in each other's eyes. No wonder I didn't see many elderly people when I was queuing just now. "Hello, this is your escape number. Please keep it safe." The Staff's words brought the two back to reality. Next, please bring your card to the designated place for a physical examination. Zhang Bojin hurriedly took the card handed over by the staff and walked forward with Sunan. The front is full of unknowns. Chapter 165 Hibernation begins. Zhang Man followed Wu Pengxing silently. She walked through the crowd and entered a metal passage. Zioman, your name is Zioman, right? Wu Pengxing's voice sounded. The passage was empty and there was even some echo. Yes. Zhang Man nodded slightly and responded in a low voice. Silence fell between the two again. Gradually, the passage came to an end. Looking at Zuan number 2 on the tarmac in front of him, Zhang Man's eyes widened suddenly and he froze on the spot. Zuan number 2 is obviously a bit too shocking for a child of her age. Wu, uncle. Wu, where are we going? Zhang Man swallowed slightly, his slightly childish voice full of panic. Wu Pengxing chuckled. Enough waiting. Let's go to Africa. Africa Tower of Babel, the bottom of the space elevator. A large city built around the Tower of Babel. Due to geographical factors, at this moment, the local temperature has exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. Under such high temperatures, almost all plants and animals face a life and death crisis. There are no pedestrians on the city streets. There were only speeding trucks and trains running along the tracks in the sky over the city. Zuanv 2 starships were shuttled back and forth. In order to increase the efficiency of material transportation, except for some managers, there are basically no real residents in the entire city. Just lots of robots and robotic arms under Zero's remote control. Countless robots and mechanical arms transported materials to the huge space elevator. Subsequently, the electricity provided by the helium fusion reactor drove the space elevator, transporting countless materials into space. Unlike before, the sky above the city of Babel seemed extremely busy at this time. Ships of Zuan 2 came from all directions under Zero's control. These starships entered the corresponding apron in an orderly manner. Space elevator. Is this the Tower of Babel? Zhang Man looked through the porthole and stared blankly at the scene outside the window. Between heaven and earth, a thin rope connecting the two ends suddenly appeared. How is it? Is it spectacular? Wu Pengxing chuckled and said, when I saw this thing for the first time, my reaction was much greater than yours. As he spoke, he made a funny expression. PFFT. Zhang Man looked at Wu Pengxing's exaggerated expression beside him and couldn't help laughing. How long is the Tower of Babel? She moved to the porthole, raised her head, and looked overhead. The straight thin line went all the way up until it disappeared into the thick clouds. If I remember correctly, it should be 91,000 kilometers. Wow. At this moment, Zhang Man finally showed her expected performance at her age. My home is about 50 kilometers away from the county seat. She frowned, trying to figure out the quantitative relationship. Ha ha ha. Wu Pengxing smiled and reached out to touch Zhang Man's head. I really want to go up and have a look. Zhang Man murmured to himself. Hearing this, Wu Pengxing's eyes showed a bit of regret. He shook his head. It's a pity that you won't have such luck this time. In order to speed up transportation efficiency, the current acceleration of the Tower of Babel is unbearable for humans. Wu Pengxing added, except under the protection of the hibernation cabin. Perhaps you will have this opportunity in the future. Zhang Man nodded silently and withdrew his gaze. Captain Wu, we are almost there. A reminder sounded from the side. Wu Pengxing quickly straightened his expression, turned to Zhang Man beside him and said, Zio Man, sit tight. We are about to land. I was entrusted by your parents to send you safely to the hibernation cabin. Hearing this, Zhang Man's eyes dimmed slightly. Wu Pengxing's mouth twitched, resisting the urge to slap himself in the mouth. With such a broken mouth, why can't he open the pot and pick up the pot? As Zuan 2 starship flew slowly towards the B-45 apron under the strong sunlight. Under Zero's control, its flight trajectory was unusually smooth. Slow down, hover, land. A series of operations are completed in one go. In order to avoid being burned by the high temperature outside the starship, after Zuanvta landed, a hemispherical light shielding curtain was automatically raised on the surrounding ground. The refrigeration system was started, and after the surrounding temperature dropped to normal levels, Zuanv 2's hatch slowly opened. Zhang Man followed Wu Pengxing and walked out of Zuanv number 2 first. Looking at the slightly narrow space around him. Zhang Man cast a puzzled expression on Wu Pengxing. The next moment, a hole suddenly opened in the ground ahead, revealing an escalator leading to the ground. Such a technological scene naturally shocked Zhang Man and other children. For a time, waves of exclamation sounded one after another. Ahem. Wu Pengxing coughed hard. Everyone, please be quiet. Now, we are going to the underground base of the Tower of Babel. After the physical examination, you will enter the hibernation chamber to begin the 50-year hibernation process. The content of the physical examination is simple, but also important. Resistance to hibernation. To put it simply, it is to test whether the human body will autonomously produce antibodies to hibernating hormone. Although the probability is very low, in the face of the absolute base, there are actually not many such people. This kind of people are collectively called hibernation insulators. As the name suggests, they are insulated from hibernation. Unless new technology emerges, they will never be able to enter hibernation. In a sense, this is extremely cruel. Faced with their companions and family members entering hibernation one after another, these hibernation insulators cannot enter hibernation and can only quietly die of old age in the starship. Hibernators wake up and find that their original friends or family have turned into a pile of ashes. Hibernation insulators go to death alone in endless loneliness and solitude. This kind of thing is an extremely huge blow to both parties. Fortunately, there are no so-called hibernation insulators among the group of children led by Wu Pengxing. After the physical examination, everyone entered their own hibernation cabins one by one. Unlike the hibernation cabins for adults, the hibernation cabins for children are smaller, which also means that the same size of spacecraft can transport more people. 05:0004:59 Zhang Man lay quietly in the hibernation cabin, waiting for the countdown in front of her to end. At this moment, she suddenly thought of her grandfather who was thousands of miles away. The bits and pieces of the past emerged in her mind. When she thought that everything would be different, when she opened her eyes again, a tear appeared in the corner of Zhang Man's eye again. 00:00 The countdown was reset. Her arm hurt slightly. After a few seconds, her consciousness began to blur. The crystal tears slowly slid down her cheeks, and the indicator light of the hibernation cabin turned green. Hibernation success. Chapter 166 Addressing all humanity. Half a month later in the first laboratory of the Human Union, Professor, the escape plan has completed the statistics. Zeros. Holographic projection appeared beside Lu Yongchang. Lu Yongchang paused the pen in his hand and asked in a deep voice, "How is it? Has the population exceeded 5 billion? While asking, he showed a deep worry in his eyes. Letting 5 billion people escape first is the limit of what Zero can do at present. Once it exceeds, some people will inevitably be left behind. And these people who are left behind will cause some unnecessary riots. Professor, only 4 billion people have applied for the escape plan." 4 billion? Lu Yongchang was stunned and quickly raised his head to look at the holographic projection beside him. What happened? Why? Only 4 billion? The holographic projection picture changed quietly, and a detailed statistical chart appeared in front of him. According to statistics, most of the elderly who meet the screening criteria have given up their qualifications. LV. Yongchang stared at the statistical chart suspended in the air, muttering to himself, "Why, they think this can increase the success rate of the escape plan a little bit." Zero answered quickly. Hearing this answer, Lu Yongchang couldn't help but fall into silence. That's right. The fewer the number of people, the higher the success rate of the escape plan, which is natural. He put down the pen in his hand, raised his hands to cover his eyes, and sighed softly. After a long time, he put down his hands, revealing some red eyes. Zero. Start the escape plan. How long will it take to complete the manufacturing of Jianmu? About a month, Professor. Zero answered immediately without any hesitation. The manufacturing progress of Babel Spaceport has reached 80%, and the Luaneo project can be started at any time. LV. Yongchang's eyes revealed some contemplation. The living environment on the surface of the Earth is constantly deteriorating, and the biggest crisis facing mankind is the solar anomaly, not the invasion of extraterrestrial civilizations. So the Luanbad project has also made some changes, of course, according to the current technical level, as long as there is an extraterrestrial civilization capable of invading the solar system. Humans basically have no ability to fight back. The modified Luanbird is larger than the original. After removing all weapon systems and unnecessary functions, it has become a truly large-scale population and material transportation starship. 0. Speed up the production of hibernation cabins, and let 4 billion people enter hibernation in turn. The hibernation location is selected under Babel and Jianmuaz. For those who give up the escape plan, Yongchang showed some reluctance in his eyes. Try to distribute some medicine to make them suffer less, as he said. Yongchang sighed deeply. We don't have the energy to help them. Also, help me prepare. I want to speak to all mankind. At the same time, as the speed of solar anomalies continues to accelerate, the average temperature of the Earth is now 5 degrees Celsius higher than the same period last year. The melting of a large number of glaciers has caused the sea level to rise continuously. All coastal cities around the world are constantly being submerged by seawater under the organization of the Parliament. Residents of all coastal cities have moved inland. The sparsely populated plateau has now become a paradise that everyone dreams of. The former capital of Xia State. Councillor Lee sat in an air-conditioned office, looking out the window with worry. A group of thick dark clouds completely covered the sky. This is another effect caused by the solar mutation. After the temperature rises, the seawater evaporates in large quantities, naturally forming large groups of dark clouds. Although these dark clouds block most of the sunlight, they do not have much cooling effect. On the contrary, the Earth at this time is like a steamer that is constantly heated. The only thing to be thankful for is that the Earth is moving towards the aphelion at this time, which gives humans a chance to survive. The rain has been getting more and more frequent recently. Councillor Lee sighed and asked in a low voice, how is the migration work going on here? Han Kaiming's voice sounded on the side. The progress is good. The people in the coastal areas have been evacuated, but, Han Kaiming said hesitantly, many elderly people chose to stay where they are. We can only leave some food and necessary comfort medicine for them. Hearing this, Councillor Lee's face suddenly dimmed. Although he had expected such a result, he still found it a little unbearable when he heard it. These are all human lives. Although the People's Federation has been established, they still have the blood of Yan Huang in their bones. After a moment of silence, Councillor Lee asked again, how are the casualties during the migration? The office fell into silence again. Chairman, casualties are inevitable in such a large-scale escape and migration. After a long time, Han Kaiming answered with difficulty. At present, according to incomplete statistics, at least tens of millions of people have died in various accidents. Councillor Lee took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and leaned back on the chair. A drop of turbid tears slowly slid down the old man's wrinkled cheek. The old man slowly stood up from his chair and said word by word, Kaiming, help me get ready. I'm going to the front line. Han Kaiming's expression changed drastically, and he stepped forward and pushed Councillor Lee back to his seat. Chairman, please don't joke. Now, the entire People's Union cannot do without you. If something happens to you, the People's Union Council, which was formed with great difficulty, will probably. Member Lee frowned. He knew in his heart that what Han Kaiming said was right. The People's Union had just been formed. Although there was no talk of a country on the surface, behind the scenes, everyone still retained the concept of a country in their subconscious, not to mention others. Even he himself, when considering issues, subconsciously considered it from the perspective of Xiaguo. This is inevitable. Only time can erase this deep-rooted concept. But the people are now in the most dangerous moment. In this critical moment, I must, before Councillor Lee finished speaking, the light of a holographic projection suddenly appeared on the side. Chairman, Professor Liu applied to speak to the world. Member Lee's eyes suddenly emitted a dazzling brilliance. He turned his head and looked at Han Kaiming. Kaiming, it seems that our God-making plan will finally come in handy. Councillor Lee said with a look of relief. Han Kaiming nodded in agreement. I believe in Yongchang. He can do it. Councillor Lee nodded silently and then looked at Zero's holographic projection again. Zero, let all departments unconditionally cooperate with Professor Liu's speech. This is an order. Okay, counselor. Zero's holographic image slowly dissipated. I wish you good health. Chapter 167. The approaching coastline. North America. A city near the coast. Hope. A high-pitched shout came from downstairs. Hey. Hope responded in a long tone. Mom, what's wrong? Then, a rush of footsteps came from the stairs. Hope. There was a hint of anger in the female voice. How many times have I told you not to lean against the window? With this weather, the window may not be able to hold up one day. Some time ago, I saw a child in a penguin colony in South America. Just because he was standing by the window, he was swept away when the hurricane arrived. As she spoke, the woman reached out and pulled Hope away from the window. Mom. Faced with her mother's scolding, Hope pointed helplessly out the window. It didn't rain outside today. It's a nice weather. That won't work either. The woman glanced out the window point. When she saw the white sun in the sky, the woman's mouth twitched slightly. The temperature outside is so high. You, Hope, pointed to the thermometer beside her. 33 degrees Celsius. Mom, the earth is moving toward aphelion, and it's not so hot outside now. Seeing his mother's face gradually turned red, Hope quickly pointed to the window, and, Mom, look, the coastline is close again. Hearing this, the woman was slightly startled, then quickly turned her head and looked out the window point looking at the azure sea water. The woman didn't have any appreciation in her eyes. Her hands were shaking slightly, and her eyes were full of fear. Oh my god, why did it rise so fast? The next second, she quickly turned around and grabbed the suitcase on the side. Quick, Hope. What? Hope looked at his mother blankly. What are you doing standing there? The woman, her hair disheveled, shouted loudly, hurry up and pack your clothes. It's time for us to move. Seeing his mother half kneeling on the ground sorting her clothes, Hope curled her lips and turned to look out the window again. There are all kinds of debris floating on the blue sea. Wood products, foam, plastic, countless man-made objects rise and fall with the waves. We have to move again, Hope muttered as he squatted down to help his mother organize her clothes. Didn't we just move a few days ago? The woman's body trembled slightly and she stopped what she was doing. She put down the folded clothes in her hands, sighed softly, and touched Hope's head with a sad look on her face. I don't want to move either, but this is all for survival. You know when your dad moved last time. Speaking of this, the woman's voice suddenly choked up. Seeing this scene, Hope's young heart twitched suddenly, and a heartbreaking pain came from it. Mom, don't think about this. Let's pack our clothes quickly. He didn't know how to comfort his mother, so he could only reach out his hand, imitate his mother's past appearance, and pat her back gently. A string of numbered cards tied to his arm swayed back and forth along with Hope's movements. The woman wiped the tears from her eyes and reached out to grab the dangling cards. Hope, remember, no matter what, you must keep your cards in your hand. This is your ticket to enter the hibernation cabin first. Looking at his serious mother, Hope's eyes flashed with confusion, and then he nodded vigorously. Hey. The woman sighed and reached out to stroke Hope's round head. I don't know when it will be our turn. I heard that in Zaya country, all teenagers under the age of 20 have entered hibernation pods. Hope corrected her mother's words with a serious look on her face. Mom, there is no such thing as a country anymore. Our Chinese teacher once said that now there is only the People's Federation, and the whole world is a community. The woman smiled brittlely and nodded. Okay. She sighed softly again. It had only been a few months since the People's League was established, but the original culture of the United States had completely disappeared. In fact, even the word Millikan was rarely heard. Even English has gradually faded out of people's daily life. Get your things in order. The woman did not continue to think about these things. She knew that this kind of thing was not something that an ordinary person like her should consider. Late afternoon. Come on, Hope. It's time for us to go outside. the small villa, a car parked at the entrance of the courtyard, and the woman struggled to move some necessary items into the trunk. Hearing his mother's urging, Hope turned his head and looked behind him again. There were waves of tiny waves coming from the sea. Hey. The young man sighed for the first time in his life. A few minutes later, the fully charged car started. There was a slight buzzing sound, and the car drove the two of them forward along the highway. Seeing a few car lights coming on from time to time on the roadside, the look on the woman's face became increasingly gloomy. Everyone is running away, Hope whispered. The woman nodded. Yes, everyone wants to survive. So, where are we going now? Hope turned to look at her mother, her big eyes reflecting a little crystal light in the darkness. I don't know either. The woman shook her head in confusion. Anyway, let's drive inland. Let's see where everyone goes, and where we will go. Looking at the cars whizzing by around them, the atmosphere in the car gradually became depressing. The woman pondered for a moment, then reached out and turned on the radio in the car. The following will tell you the latest progress of the escape plan. At present, the first batch of hibernation projects in Asia has been completed, and the second and third batches of hibernating personnel are entering hibernation in an orderly manner. The American region will launch the first batch of hibernation projects in the near future. At that time, all those who are qualified to escape are asked to go to the gathering point in the nearest city. As the radio sounded, there was a loud bang in the sky. Mom, it's Zuan number 2. Hope lowered the window, stretched out his head to look at the sky, and shouted to his mother excitedly. It's true what the radio said, the first batch of hibernation has begun. There was a bit of excitement in the woman's eyes. She whistled lightly as she asked Hope to close the car window. We have to speed up. When we get to the next city, I will take you to the meeting point. When the time comes. Speaking of this, the woman's voice suddenly stopped. She suddenly thought that at that time, it would be the time to say goodbye to her child. Just for a moment, the car fell into silence again. Mom, otherwise, I won't hibernate for now. What are you talking about? The woman glared at the boy next to her with some annoyance and scolded softly. Don't talk such nonsense, and then hibernate. Hope didn't reply, just sat in his seat silently. Chapter 168. Me? You can call me Zero. Time passes bit by bit. The sound of the waves of the sea is getting weaker and weaker. Looking at Hope, who had already fallen asleep in his seat, a doting smile appeared on the corner of the woman's mouth. She parked her car at a charging station on the side of the road. After charging the car, she returned to the car. After locking the car door, the woman slowly closed her eyes. The fatigue accumulated from driving for a long time made her fall asleep quickly. She was awakened by the rapid sound of rain. Looking at the huge raindrops on the windshield in front of her, her face suddenly turned pale. It's over. Her last escape experience taught her a profound lesson. Never travel on a rainy day. As global temperatures rise, extreme weather becomes more common. You never know if the rain in front of you will turn into a hurricane. Damn it. The woman cursed lightly and quickly fastened her seatbelt. Hope, wake up. We should go. Hope, who was in the passenger seat, opened his eyes drowsily. Hope suddenly sobered up when she saw raindrops on the windshield. A flash of fear flashed deep in his eyes. The scene that happened not long ago appeared in his mind again. During the heavy rain, a man was hit by a telegraph pole blown down by strong winds. He then fell into more than 10 centimeters of water and never responded to his family's calls. Hope, fasten your seatbelt. A high-pitched shout came from the side. The wind is not strong now. We have to go to the next city quickly. After coming back to his senses, Hope looked solemn and quickly fastened his seatbelt. Charging pile. Hope pointed out the window and reminded loudly. The woman gritted her teeth, took a deep breath, turned around, opened the car door, and rushed out. A gust of wind brought heavy raindrops into the car. Bang. The car door is closed. Hope's heart also lifted. After dozens of seconds, the car door opened again. The moment he saw his mother, Hope breathed a sigh of relief. The wind is getting stronger. The woman became more and more anxious. She quickly sat back in her chair and hurriedly started the car. There is no shelter from the rain nearby. We have to find a house quickly. With that said, the woman stepped on the accelerator hard. Squeak. There was a harsh screeching sound from tires immediately afterwards. A powerful recoil force pressed Hope hard onto the chair. Half an hour later on the empty road point, a car with orange-yellow double jumping lights was parked quietly on the side of the road point. The road is broken. Several large trees blown down by the wind cut off the entire road point in the car. The woman looked pale and her body was trembling slightly. Perhaps because she had been soaked by the rain just now. There was an abnormal blush on her cheeks. Hope, the woman, gritted her back molars, tried her best to suppress her trembling teeth, and said softly, "The wind is getting stronger and stronger outside, and we can't stay in the car anymore." Looking at the swaying trees outside the window, Hope's eyes were full of panic. He shrank back, holding the seatbelt tightly with his little hands, and said with a hint of crying in his voice, "Then, where are we going? It's so windy outside, you'll die if you go out." The woman said nothing and started the car again. Her eyes turned to the big trees that had been blown down by the wind. The next moment, the car swayed forward. Bang! The front of the car hit a tree trunk. There was a creaking sound, and the vehicle formed a perfect triangle with two opposite fallen trees. The woman breathed a sigh of relief. "Let's get out of the car." After turning on all the lights in the car, she said firmly to Hope, "We are hiding in this triangle area. Whether we can survive depends on luck." The rain was getting heavier and heavier, but the wind was slowly getting lighter. Looking at his mother who fell into a coma next to him, Hope's eyes were full of horror. "Mom, Mom." He pushed his mother tremblingly and called softly. No response. He followed his mother's example and put his hand on her forehead. So hot, he quickly withdrew his hand, and large drops of hot tears fell from his eyes. What to do? He tried to drag his mother back into the car, but failed many times. He was still a child after all, and he was so exhausted that he couldn't even stand firmly, let alone pick up an adult from the ground and carry him back to the car. Seeing the blood on his mother's face getting lighter and lighter, Hope's heart gradually sank into the endless abyss. Just when he was about to give up hope, an engine roar came from the side. Hope suddenly raised her head and looked to the side. Several faint blue flames came into view. Above the flames is a huge creature with signal lights flashing all over it. "Zuanv number 2, Zuanv number 2. He stood up suddenly from the ground and shouted loudly. The hatch opens. A silver-white robot walked out of it and walked steadily to the big tree. Signs of life detected. Rescue initiated. An electronic synthesized sound sounded. The next second, the huge tree trunk was slowly moved away, revealing an opening for people to pass through. Inside Zuanv number 2. As soon as he entered Zuanv number 2, Hope was stunned. Silver-white robots stood quietly on the spot. No one, he asked timidly. "No, this Zuanv second is carrying only robots." After putting the unconscious woman on the simple hospital bed, the robot turned around and spoke in an electronic synthesized voice. "Then, who are you? Where is the driver?" "Me. You can call me Zero. I'm an artificial intelligence." As the electronic synthesized voice sounded, a holographic projection appeared in the air. "I remotely control this Zuanv second. Next, I will send you to the nearest city, where you will be properly settled." Hope's eyes were full of confusion, and he nodded, as if he understood. The next moment, he seemed to remember something, and suddenly bowed to the robot. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, maybe we would all." Zero, in the holographic image, shook his head, silently hiding his image, and replaced it with the appearance of Yongchang. "Don't thank me. You should thank my creator, your creator." Hope looked at the familiar face in front of him and suddenly widened his eyes. "I recognize him. He is Professor Yongchang." Zero reminded softly. Yes. Hope tapped his head lightly, and his eyes flashed with light as he looked at the holographic projection. "I want to be like Professor Lu in the future." "Okay, after hibernation is over, you can choose your life," Zero said softly. "In 10 minutes, Professor Lu will speak to all human beings on the earth. Do you want to listen?" "Yes." Hope nodded vigorously. Chapter 169 Humanity, Glory Forever. As Hope's voice fell, the holographic projection inside Zhuan changed rapidly. A countdown appeared in the sky. 09:4509:44. Young Hope looked at the numbers jumping in the air, with a flash of excitement and anticipation in his eyes. I wonder what Professor Lu will say later. Within a certain meeting point. It was crowded. The bright lights couldn't hide the gloomy atmosphere in the air. Everyone's expression seems to be carved out of the same mold. Silent, negative, faces hen. Slight sobs came from all corners, mixing together to form a noisy bass. The depressing environment created a negative feedback, making everyone feel a little heavier again. The person in charge frowned as he looked at the scene in front of him. He sighed softly, turned to the staff around him and said, "This can't go on like this. What's the difference between a person who has no hope and a walking dead?" The staff member nodded silently, and he was also affected by the depressing atmosphere. Even though he knew that such an atmosphere was very unfavorable to his escape plan, what could he do? Everyone present has more or less experienced life and death. Who can feel better when watching their relatives and friends die in front of them? The person in charge, who received no response, sighed again. "I heard that Professor Lu is going to speak later, but I don't know what happened to the escape plan. I hope it's good news." The staff looked numbly at the people in front of them. Good news? Hope so. The bright lights at the assembly point dimmed quietly. The sudden change caused everyone to stop moving, and many people even had a bit of panic in their eyes. The next moment, the lights on the large holographic projection equipment installed around the assembly point a few days ago came on. The light of the holographic projection lit up over the assembly point, and a countdown followed. There was a commotion in the crowd. The person in charge's eyes moved slightly, and he quickly picked up the phone and explained. Upon hearing that Professor Lu was speaking, the original commotion gradually subsided, and many people had a look of anticipation in their eyes. Inside Zhuan number 2. Time passes minute by minute. When the countdown turned to 0 hours, Hope held her breath. Like Hope, at this moment, countless people around the world are holding their breath. Everyone's eyes are turned to the screen or holographic projection in front of them. "Hello, fellow humans." A calm, gentle male voice sounded. "I'm the chief scientist of the People's Federation, Lu Yongchang." As the sound sounded, the picture in the holographic projection gradually became clearer. Lu Yongchang, wearing a Chinese tunic suit, sat quietly behind a desk covered with draft paper. Hope opened her eyes wide and looked at the desk. The draft paper was densely filled with complex symbols and calculations. After just one glance, Hope looked away dizzily and looked at Lu Yongchang sitting behind the desk again. The dark circles around his eyes and the peeling lips all showed the tremendous pressure on him. Ever since the sun began to accelerate its changes, humankind's living environment has continued to deteriorate. Lu Yongchang's voice continued to sound, and as he spoke, the scene quietly changed, and the disasters that had occurred in the past few months began to play back bit by bit. Forest fires, tsunamis, hurricanes. Looking at the picture on the holographic projection, Hope's face turned slightly pale, but Lu Yongchang changed the subject and raised his voice a little higher. "Humanity has not surrendered. During this period, in order to survive, we completed countless projects that were unimaginable before." The holographic projection screen changes again. Zhuan 2 took off one after another from the ground, carrying a large amount of supplies to an altitude of 91,000 kilometers. A long cable slowly hangs from the sky. With the endless work of countless robots and mechanical arms, a ladder to the sky gradually takes shape. Tower of Babel. This is mankind's first space elevator. Jianmu. As of now, most of the construction work has been completed, and it is expected to be officially put into use in half a month. The camera cuts again. In space, a huge silver-white disc appeared at the end of the space elevator. On the disc, there are also billions of robots and mechanical arms. As you can see, the spaceport has begun to take shape. Next, the Luaneo project will also be launched simultaneously. Thanks to these projects, we can send some of humanity off Earth. Meeting. Everyone silently looked up at the holographic image in the sky. The spectacular and grand construction scene in the picture brought some changes to these numb faces. At this moment, we are suffering unimaginable difficulties and setbacks in the past few months, according to incomplete statistics, the global death toll has reached more than 1 billion. Among them, there are old people who voluntarily quit their escape plans, and there are children who bear the hope of mankind. But I still have a dream. I dream that we can escape from this disaster. I dream that we can find a planet suitable for survival. I dream that humans in the future will no longer be constrained by external things. Yongchang stood up excitedly, waved his right hand and shouted loudly, "Come on, fellow compatriots, human civilization will never surrender." LV. Yongchang's voice echoed around the world. Imagine that when hibernation ends, we have arrived at a planet suitable for survival, where we can. The originally numb face gradually showed some vitality. Everyone's eyes once again showed some hope. But I don't know where a cheer suddenly came from. Afterwards, shouts came one after another, gradually converging into an extremely loud voice. Finally, the moment LV Yongchang's voice sounded again, the originally noisy gathering quickly quieted down. Everyone looked eagerly at the holographic image in the air. LV Yongchang in the picture showed some fatigue in his eyes, slowly raised his hand, and saluted the camera. May the glory of mankind last forever. At this moment, everyone let go of their obsession with the country. Everyone whispered the same sentence: humanity, glory forever. Humanity, glory forever. Inside Zuan's second, Hope's eyes flickered with a little light, and he muttered to himself. In his young heart, an extremely strong emotion suddenly rose. Hope, we're here. Zero's voice came. Hope was stunned for a moment, and turned his head to look. At some point, Zuan's second quietly landed in the nearest city. The hatch was already open, and outside the door were several excited soldiers and a tarmac as bright as day. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170 Biosphere 2 Phased Progress. The next day. Yongchang frowned and looked at the information on the desk in front of him. The sound of the office door opening came. He raised his head and glanced at the visitor, then lowered his head again and started looking through the documents. "Brother, Zhu?" Yongchang asked softly. "What's the matter, Fang?" Zhu naturally didn't care about Yongchang's attitude. He walked to the desk with a smile on his face. "There are two good news. Which one do you want to hear?" There was a look of doubt in Yongchang's eyes. He looked away from the documents in front of him and raised his head to look at Fang Zhu. "Two, Fang." Zhu nodded. "The first one is related to your speech yesterday. Global speaking has made a big difference. Currently, feedback has come from all over the world. It is said that people are much more motivated to flee. There are even some people who will take the initiative to help the staff and assist in the implementation of the escape plan." Yongchang nodded with satisfaction. "This is indeed good news. Increasing the enthusiasm for escape can greatly increase the survival rate of escapees in interstellar navigation. Within the load range, the larger the effective population, the better. As for what is the effective population, it's simple and cruel. They are people who are already productive and will be productive in the future. In other words, young adults and children. After all, you never know what surprises may happen in the universe. Forget about the universe. Just on Earth, a chain disaster caused by rising global average temperatures killed more than 1 billion people in just a few months. Although most of these 1 billion people are elderly people with limited mobility, the few young adults and children who died in natural disasters also indirectly weakened the development potential of human civilization. Thinking of this, Yongchang's eyes dimmed a bit. He sighed softly, shook his head and said, "What a pity. When the hibernation plan is implemented, we don't know how many people will survive." Fang Zhu's face also became a lot heavier. "Professor, based on the data accumulated in the early stage, it is estimated that the hibernation plan will take about 3 months to be fully implemented. Considering that extreme weather will become more and more frequent, it is estimated that the number of escapees will decline to about 3.8 billion. Zero answered sternly and even listed a large amount of data to prove his inference. 3.8 billion, a total of 200 million less. Yongchang's eyes became more sad. But there was nothing he could do about this situation. Currently, the Spaceport, Luaneo project, and Jianmu manufacturing projects have completely drained Zero's computing power. If computing power is allocated to build shelters and slows down the progress of other projects, the consequences will only be more serious. What's the other good news? After a moment of silence, Yongchang took a deep breath, cheered up a little, and asked Fang Zhu. After hearing the question, Fang Zhu shook his head and pulled himself out of the heavy atmosphere just now. I'm sure you can't guess what the good news is. Recalling the report he just received, Fang Zhu's eyes showed a bit of joy. Seeing the confusion in Yongchang's eyes, he cleared his throat and prepared to report. The holographic projection screen quietly changed. Professor, the Biosphere 2 experiment has achieved initial success. Fang Zhu's expression suddenly froze. Zero, don't bring this. As for Yongchang, he naturally ignored Fang Zhu's protest and stood up with excitement on his face, looking at the holographic image in front of him. Zero, arrange a Zuan number 2 for me. I want to go to the ecological sphere number 2, to Taclimacan Desert. As the sun changes faster, the desert has become a real forbidden zone for life. Under the scorching sun, the surface temperature of the Taclimacan Desert reaches over 90 degrees Celsius. In the center of the Taclimacan Desert, a huge hemispherical glass building stands in this restricted area of life, as if challenging the power of nature. Zuan number 2, which was completely black, drew a graceful curve and slowly landed on the tarmac next to the glass building. The powerful thrust of the whole thruster kicked up countless yellow sand. You can see through the portholes that the world around Zuan 2 has become a hazy world. Professor, we are here. Zero's voice came. I have informed Professor Shen Wen, and he is already waiting for you at the door of the isolation cabin. Yongchang nodded, then looked at the thermometer aside. The moment he saw the numbers, he stood up decisively and took out the spacesuit from the cabinet on the side. Are you kidding me? With the temperature outside right now, he would probably be able to smell the smell of barbecue within a few minutes of going out. The hatch slowly opened, and Yongchang, wearing a silver-white spacesuit, slowly walked out of Zuan 2. Through the mask, he could clearly see several camels turned into mummies on the sand. He sighed silently and stepped towards the hatch of Biosphere 2 in the distance. To ensure a tight seal, the Biosphere 2 project's hatch structure mimics the design of a spacecraft, a circular hatch that can be drilled through by a single person. He reached out and grabbed the handle of the circular hatch and twisted it open with force. After several turns, the hatch slowly opened. He knelt down and got inside. Professor hello. As soon as he took off his spacesuit and walked out of the isolation cabin, Yongchang heard an excited shout. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the sound. It looked familiar. Professor Shen, he called tentatively. Yes, I'm Shen Siwen. The man walked up to Yongchang cheerfully and shook his right hand with both hands. Welcome to Biosphere 2. I also watched the global speech yesterday. You spoke very well. Yongchang didn't say too much. He nodded and got straight to the point. Okay, time is urgent. I won't say any nonsense. Tell me about the current situation of Biosphere 2. This is related to the future plan of the human union. When Shen Siwen heard this, his expression suddenly became serious. Professor please follow me, said Shen Siwen, turning around and walking inside. The Biosphere is different from other research projects. Some things cannot be concluded by just looking at the data. It is better for me to take you to see it with your own eyes. Yongchang nodded, which was also his idea. Otherwise, he could just sit in the office and ask Ling directly about the progress of the project. Just after walking a short distance, he keenly noticed the abnormality. He raised his head and looked at the glass dome of Biosphere number 2, only to see countless silver-white sequins attached to it. Professor Shen, this is Shen. Siwen turned his head and saw Yongchang looking up and quickly explained, this was just modified recently. After the sun changed, the internal refrigeration system could not keep up. So we asked Ling to make these reflective sequins to reflect most of the sunlight and leave only suitable light. Chapter 171. Billions of misunderstandings. Professor, this is the simulated ocean area. With the help of the wave-making system, we can simulate waves and tidal phenomena in real time. Hearing this, Yongchang turned his head and looked in the direction of Shen Siwen's finger, a pool of water that was neither too big nor too small. This is the so-called ocean. He squatted down and observed carefully. The water quality looks good. Shen Siwen smiled bitterly and shook his head. Professor, this is the result of the second experiment. Huh? Yongchang raised his eyebrows slightly. What do you mean? The first experiment failed, alas. Shen Siwen sighed softly. During the first experiment, we also encountered the same situation as the United States. Simulated marine red tide flooding introduced a large number of organisms died until Zero took over the main control system. This situation improved. Yongchang did not speak, but cast an inquiring look at Professor Shen Siwen. Professor Lu, although Biosphere 2 has achieved phase success, I have to pour cold water on you. Shen Siwen said again after a moment of silence. With the current human technology, it is basically impossible to create a self-circulating biosphere on a starship. Lu. Yongchang's face changed slightly. How could this be? According to the system, artificial biosphere technology is clearly a prerequisite for starship manufacturing. Is there wrong information in the system? Thinking of this, Lu Yongchang's face suddenly became ugly. Professor Shen, please explain it in detail. Shen Siwen sighed softly. With the help of Zero, we have conducted countless simulations. Finally, we found a combination that can barely maintain balance. Even so, this biosphere still needs Zero to monitor it in real time and make various fine-tuning to it. For example, if the concentration of carbon dioxide in the biosphere is high, Zero needs to increase the light intensity in the tropical rainforest area a little bit. At present, this small biosphere is like a chaotic system. You never know what unexpected situation will occur in the next second. Only artificial intelligence like Zero can keep up with its speed of change and make appropriate adjustments to it. Besides, the crops produced by this biosphere are basically only enough for a few of us researchers to eat. Once the number of crops is increased, other problems will inevitably arise. Therefore, it is completely unrealistic for us to realize a truly self-sufficient biosphere in a starship of a few hundred meters or a few thousand meters in size. Shen Siwen said a lot at once. Yongchang also understood what Shen Siwen meant. It's just, ahem. Professor Shen, I think you have a little misunderstanding of what I mean. Yongchang coughed a few times and said awkwardly, it's my fault that I didn't explain it clearly at the beginning. Our current demand is not the kind of ecological starship that is completely self-sufficient. The so-called biosphere technology is just to better control the environment inside the starship. Do you understand what I mean? Looking at Shen Siwen's confused eyes, Lu Yongchang pondered for a moment and continued to explain. For example, although most humans are currently sent to hibernation cabins, but in interstellar voyages, there are always people who need to stay awake. In addition to the necessary fleet status monitoring, some basic research cannot be interrupted. At that time, we will build some starships that can accommodate tens of thousands of people at the same time. The technology we need to achieve long-term control of the internal environment of this kind of survival starship. So, can you understand? Shen Siwen suddenly realized. The corners of his eyes twitched violently a few times. God knows how much effort he has spent in order to create a perfect biosphere during this period. Apart from anything else, at least half of his hair has fallen out. If this is all you want, Professor Lu, then the biosphere project can be declared a success. Shen Siwen said with a sad face, if it's just to control the living environment in the starship, as long as there are certain equipment, it's not worth mentioning for Zero now. After all, after removing hundreds of different organisms, even the chaotic system becomes simple. Ahem. Lu Yongchang scratched his head again in embarrassment, and he also found that he was not doing it right. This is equivalent to asking the chef to prepare a full banquet for him when he just wanted to eat a bite of white rice. After visiting the research results of Shen Siwen and his team, Yongchang's eyes moved slightly. By the way, if this ecosystem is moved to Mars, can it be maintained? Shen Siwen was stunned. Of course it can. Just build various facilities in proportion, and introduce the same proportion of biological populations. What? If we add 500 million humans? Shen Siwen, looking at the shit-eating expression on Shen Siwen's face, Yongchang shook his head with regret. What a pity. Shen Siwen's expression moved slightly. Professor, are you planning to bring humans to Mars? LV Yongchang nodded. The surface of the Earth will soon be unsuitable for human habitation. The original reserve of mineral resources has been almost consumed after completing the escape plan. Next, we need to obtain as many resources as possible before the solar helium flash occurs in order to cope with future interstellar travel. Mars is a good springboard. Shen Siwen frowned, as if he was thinking about something in his mind. After a long time, he hesitated and said, Professor, if we just build a Martian city for human habitation, perhaps our algorithm can do it. However, at that time, we may need to input a large amount of resources to maintain its operation. When Yongchang heard this, his eyes suddenly lit up. Input a large amount of resources. This is nothing at all. The technology for industrial synthesis of proteins and carbohydrates is already very perfect. Even without crops and livestock, humans can survive under a perfect industrial system. It's just that the quality of life will be slightly reduced. Thinking of this, Yongchang smiled faintly. He stretched out his hand and patted Shen Siwen's shoulder in front of him. Professor Shen, this task is up to you. Shen Siwen, as if afraid that Shen Siwen had misunderstood him, Yongchang explained in detail again. I need you to design a Mars city that can accommodate 500 million people. Resource consumption is not a problem. The key is to ensure the stability of the internal environment. I will arrange other researchers to assist you. I want to see a complete design plan within 3 months. In 6 months, humans will evacuate the Earth completely. We need to leave some time for the construction of the Mars city. Chapter 170. To the eve of escape. Faced with Yongchang's request, Shen Siwen's eyes twitched again. A Mars city, where 500 million people live together. This is not an easy job. Let's not talk about anything else. Just talk about the former US Mars cabin. It only accommodated 3 astronauts, and after less than a month on Mars, serious problems arose. According to Yongchang, 500 million people will live in the Mars city for several years. Even if there is input of external materials, it is still extremely difficult to stabilize a Mars city that can carry 500 million people. But the mission has been given. Can he still refuse? Shen Siwen sighed silently, subconsciously reached out and touched the few remaining hairs on his head and whispered, Professor, I will try my best. Just, there is one more thing I need to apply to you. You say, Yongchang responded directly without any hesitation. Professor, I think we need to start the gene preservation plan. Shen Siwen said seriously. Not only edible livestock, but also many necessary animal and plant genes, and even a lot of microbial populations. These organisms are crucial to our future immigration and planet transformation plans. Yongchang nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. Humans can enter the hibernation capsule to start interstellar travel, but these animals and plants can't have several hibernation capsules, right? Live transport consumes a lot of energy and is very risky. Therefore, transporting genes has become the best choice. As long as there are enough gene samples, they can completely recreate an Earth after arriving at a habitable planet after the technological level reaches the standard. Okay, Yongchang said in a deep voice. You make a list of organisms for me in the next few days, and I will arrange someone to be responsible. 2033.1a. Few months passed in a flash. Under Zero's control, Tower of Babel, and Jian Mu have been completed long ago. The perspective moves to 91,000 kilometers from the surface point at this time. The Earth is no longer the original blue point. The entire surface of the planet is covered with dense white clouds. This is because the internal reaction of the sun is becoming increasingly intense. The temperature of the Earth's surface is rising, and the seawater is evaporating in large quantities, and in this thick white cloud like cotton candy, two thin ribbons suddenly appear. The ribbons stretch for a full 91,000 kilometers, and are connected to two huge silver white disks in space. This is the last technological achievement of mankind in the past year. Spaceport. Each spaceport has a diameter of 10 kilometers, and has 4 ports. And around these ports, a 800-meter long starship is quietly parked in the empty space. They are the illuminate starships that are responsible for the human escape plan. Dozens of helium triple fusion reactors provide it with sufficient energy, and under the drive of the latest Hall thrusters, the illuminate starship can reach a maximum speed of 200 km/s. King Tibet Plateau. Although the global average temperature has continued to rise in the past 6 months, the polar glaciers have basically melted away. However, as the roof of the world, the King Tibet Plateau is not only not eroded by seawater due to its terrain, but the temperature is even much lower than that of low altitude areas. But even so, at this moment, the temperature of the King Tibet Plateau in winter has reached about 10 degrees Celsius. This is about 20 degrees Celsius higher than the normal temperature in the past. Coupled with the increasing precipitation, the King Tibet Plateau at this time looks like a water town in the south of the Yangtze River. Lush pastures and bushes can be seen everywhere. The only pity is that the animals and plants that were originally unique to the plateau have quickly disappeared because of this rapidly changing environment. The space elevator, Jianmu, is located in an area with a higher altitude on the King Tibet Plateau. Because the geology of the King Tibet Plateau is fragile, it took a lot of effort to lay this foundation. A newly built building complex sits quietly near the foundation of the space elevator. Because the environment is gradually deteriorating, the first laboratory of the human union had to move to the King Tibet Plateau. At this moment, there are only a few million awake people left on the entire Earth. In order to save resources, except for the 3.8 billion people in the escape plan, the remaining 500 million people on the Earth have also entered the hibernation cabin. Only when Yongchang and his team leave the Earth and arrive on Mars, these 500 million people will be awakened again. Among these 500 million people, except for scientific researchers, most are starship drivers and various workers. By then, they will not only be responsible for promoting the progress of basic science, but also for obtaining as many resources as possible for interstellar navigation in the entire solar system. Yongchang stood by the window of the office, silently looking at the scenery outside the window. Full of vitality. There was a bit of emotion in his eyes. It must be said that the miracle of life is showing up all the time. Even though the Earth has reached this situation, there are still a few paradise in the world. Thinking of the humans who are about to be forced to leave the embrace of their mother planet, he sighed slightly and asked in a low voice, "Zero, the escape plan will start today, right?" The holographic projection quietly unfolded. "Yes, Professor," Zero responded calmly. "Currently, the last batch of hibernating humans in the escape plan are heading to the spaceport via the space elevator. It is expected that the last Luan Bird-Eye starship will sail out of the spaceport in an hour. Professor, do you need to play the real-time video?" Yongchang's eyes moved slightly, and he turned to look at the holographic image behind him. But the picture changes rapidly. Jianmu inside the spaceport, the hibernating cabin, which is silvery white in color and filled with light yellow deep sea fluid, follows the tracks and enters the 800-meter long Luaneo Type I starship. The head point in the upper right corner of the screen, a bright red number is beating quietly. That is the time it takes for the last starship to fill the hibernation cabin, and it is also the time it takes for these 3.8 billion people to set off for the Kippabout. "Professor, the congressman is here." As Zero's voice fell, the office door quietly opened. Seeing the old man leaning on crutches at the door, Yongchang hurried forward to greet him. "President, why are you here?" Yongchang's eyes showed a bit of annoyance. "If you are looking for me, just inform Zero." The old man slowly walked into the office on crutches, smiling cheerfully and waving his hands. It's not in the way. It's not in the way. And like you, after everyone hibernates, I have a lot of free time now. Speaking of this, the old man said with a slightly exaggerated expression, you don't know, recently I don't see a few new files on my desk a day. Hearing this, Yongchang suddenly laughed. Wouldn't it be better to have some free time? He winked at Su Yutang and said, you have been tired for such a long time, why can't you take a break? Su Yutang on the side quietly moved a chair and placed it next to the old man. The old man smiled and nodded to Su Yutang. Thank you, I don't want to rest. The old man's eyes were full of emotion. If the earth can be the same as before, I will be fine, even if I'm busy day and night. After hearing this, the atmosphere in the office became a little quiet again. The old man was keenly aware of this. In order to adjust the atmosphere, he moved his eyes slightly and said with a face full of ridicule, speaking of which, Yutang, how is your relationship with Yongchang now? The moment he heard this, Su Yutang's eyes flashed with shyness, and he pretended to be calm and said, President, I'm just Professor Lu's assistant. Lu Yongchang also looked at the old man with a wry smile on his face. Senior counselor, when has this been? Do you still have the intention to make a joke? Looking at the two young people in front of him, the old man sat on his chair and laughed. Okay, an old man like me, will not get involved in your young people's affairs. P.S. Dear readers, Kawenka is so awesome today. I spent a long time grinding out this chapter, so there is only one chapter for now. I will add another chapter if I adjust well tomorrow. I'm going to change the map next. I have to think about the plot. Chapter 173, 380 light spots. Faced with the old man's ridicule, Yongchang could only look at Su Yutang beside him helplessly. During this period of time, although he knew the thoughts of Su Yutang and the chairman of the parliament, he had no extra thoughts to think about these trivial matters, because the crisis was hanging over his head. I heard that Yutang's current scientific research level is already very good. The old man closed his eyes slightly and asked casually. Yongchang was stunned for a moment and nodded hurriedly and said, in the past year or so, there has been great progress, but compared with those older generation researchers, she still has a big gap. The old man opened his eyes again, looked at Su Yutang with a look of relief, and nodded slowly. Not bad, not bad. We are already old. After leaving the solar system, you are the future of the human union. Work hard and try to drive Yongchang over. Speaking of this, the old man couldn't help but chuckle. Obviously, he also knew that this was almost impossible to happen. Su Yutang nodded seriously, and his slightly cold voice echoed in the office. President, don't worry, I will continue to work hard until I catch up with him. Su Yutang subconsciously glanced at Lu Yongchang beside him. As for Lu Yongchang, he silently shifted his gaze and cast his eyes on the holographic image beside him. After seeing the countdown approaching 0 on the projection, his eyes moved, and he quickly reminded, President, the escape plan is about to begin. Hearing this, the old man's expression suddenly became serious. He quickly raised his head and looked at the holographic image 91,000 kilometers above the surface. Jianmu's passport. After the last hibernation cabin was sent into the Luaneo starship, the starship hatch slowly closed under the control of weak artificial intelligence. Rows of indicator lights lit up, illuminating the slightly dark passage. Under the action of the hydraulic system, the heavy spaceport hatch slowly opened. A faint blue light lit up at the tail of the starship. The weak thrust generated by the Hall thruster slowly pushed the Luaneo starship out of the spaceport. Outside the spaceport, 379 Luaneo starships loaded with hibernation capsules quietly formed a wall. Standing in the deep darkness, they were waiting for the arrival of the last Luaneo starship. The faint light generated by the Hall thruster was particularly dim in the endless darkness, just like the current situation of mankind, which would fall into the crisis of genocide if not careful. The 380th Luaneo starship, under the weak thrust, slowly drove to its position, the last corner of the starship wall. When it returned to its position, the countdown of the escape plan quietly returned to 0. Start the escape plan. On Earth. LV Yongchang took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, point. The radio signal started from the Qinghai Tibet plateau, crossed 91,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye, and entered the central control computer of 380 starships. 0.1 milliseconds later, 380 weak artificial intelligence programs responded to Zero's command. At the same time, 380 Luaneo-I-type starships lit up with dazzling blue light at the tail. That was the whole thruster running at full power. Qinghai Tibet Plateau, Human Union First Laboratory, Quantum Computer Sub-Laboratory, has the escape plan started. Mo. Zhang looked at the architecture diagram on the screen carefully and asked the researcher beside him softly, academician. Mo. It has already started. The researcher glanced at the time and responded quickly. Mo. Zhang's fingers suddenly paused and stopped typing on the keyboard. He raised his head and looked up. The thick wall blocked his sight. He pondered for a moment, stood up and walked to the window. Outside the window, it was a rare sunny day. In the evening, the sun had not completely set, and rows of bright stars suddenly appeared in the dim sky. Seeing this scene, Mo Zhang's breath suddenly choked, and a sense of pride arose from the bottom of his heart. That was the light produced by the whole thrusters of 380 starships. Compared with the slightly tired sun in the distance, these 380 star points are full of endless hope and vitality. Mo Zhang retracted his sight and looked at a hibernation cabin placed by the window. Through the transparent window of the hibernation cabin cover, an extremely old face came into his eyes. He took a deep breath. I really hope that Mr. Lin can wake up now. He sighed softly. Mr. Lin should want to see such a scene. The researcher next to him whispered, I think we will see Mr. Lin again soon. I heard that academician Mao's medical cabin research in the biological laboratory has reached the final step. I guess when we arrive on Mars, Mr. Lin will wake up from hibernation. Mo. Zhang looked up at the gradually dimming stars in the sky again and sighed silently. I hope so. Now, we are the only ones left on Earth. In Lu Yongchang's office. Looking at the 380 Luaneo starships that are moving forward into the universe without hesitation in the picture, the old man silently stood up from his chair and stretched out his right hand to salute them in an extremely standard way. These 380 starships are basically the entire human civilization. LV. Yongchang's eyes revealed a bit of sadness. In just 3 years, the total number of humans on Earth was nearly halved. The old man put down his right hand and stared at the starships that were gradually going away. How long will they take? About a year and a half. LV Yongchang responded quickly. These 380 starships will stay in the Kuiper Belt and wait for our support. The various materials inside the starships can support the consumption of hibernation for 50 years. Hearing this, the old man fell silent. After a long time, he asked in a trembling voice, what if we don't reach the Kuiper Belt within 50 years? The atmosphere in the office froze. After a long silence, LV Yongchang said in a slightly hoarse voice, then these 3.8 billion people will die in the hibernation cabin. Human civilization will perish. A trace of pain flashed in the old man's eyes. He reached out to cover his stomach and slowly sat back in his chair afterwards. Under the gaze of LV Yongchang and Su Yutong, he silently took out a can of pills from his pocket, took out a pill with trembling hands, and threw it into his mouth. Chairman. The old man waved his hand and smiled weakly. It's okay. It's an old problem. I was busy with work before, and the root of the disease is left. A trace of worry flashed in LV Yongchang's eyes, and he said in a deep voice, Chairman, you need to go for a checkup. The old man waved his hand nonchalantly. Don't worry, I know my body. Nothing serious will happen. But you, the burden in the future is very heavy. P.S. Who said I'm out of luck? However, in order to ensure quality, the subsequent update speed may be reduced. I will try my best to ensure 3 chapters a day. Chapter 174. What the chairman said was right point. After sending 3.8 billion people away, the burden on him was not only not lightened, but even heavier. Letting 3.8 billion humans enter hibernation and flee to the Kuiper belt seems to have preserved the fire of human civilization, but in fact, it only postponed the crisis for 50 years. If humans do not develop enough technology for interstellar navigation within 50 years, then humans will still face the extremely bleak result point by then. A full 3.8 billion humans will die in sleep point in LV Yongchang's view. Such a result is even more unacceptable to him than in his previous life point after the chairman left. LV Yongchang sat behind his desk with a solemn expression point. He silently thought about the next countermeasures according to the original plan. At this moment, he should announce the launch of the Mars City project point after the design drawings of the Mars City have been verified many times. He only needs to wait for a certain period of time, and a giant urban cluster that can accommodate 500 million people will appear on Mars, but this waiting time may be a bit long point according to Zero's calculations. If the construction plan of the Moon Palace project is followed, and one or several weak artificial intelligences are used to build it, the construction period will be extended to about 3 years. This is obviously unrealistic point. In about a year, the sun will begin to enter the red giant process. By then, the surface of the earth will become a purgatory. At least, ordinary life will not be able to live on the surface point. There are two solutions, but at present, both solutions have disadvantages to varying degrees. The first is to continue the practice of the previous life point, build an underground city, and wait quietly underground point after the construction of the Mars City is completed. Go to Mars via the space elevator and the Luaneo starship point. This plan seems good, but it hides countless disadvantages. First, although large-scale construction projects such as the space elevator and the escape plan have been completed, Zero's computing power has a lot of free time point. But at this moment, there are more other projects weighing on it point. In addition to various scientific research tasks, there are also tasks such as collecting Earth mineral resources, building robots to expand productivity, and continuing to build Luaneo series starships. Even if it is Zero, it is impossible to build an underground city that can accommodate hundreds of millions of people in just a few months, while taking into account other projects. Second, once you choose to enter the underground city, the scope of human activities will be greatly restricted, and a series of future plans will be affected to varying degrees under such urgent pressure. Lu Yongchang naturally cannot choose this plan. That may slow down future development point. As for the second plan, it is naturally to live directly in the spaceport point. Even if the sun begins the red giant process, the spaceport made of high-strength alloy can still withstand the high temperature brought by the sun for a short time point. At least, within 3 to 5 years, the spaceport will not be scrapped due to temperature problems, and the disadvantages of this plan are even more obvious. The current spaceport does not have a structure to generate artificial gravity point. Even artificial gravity generated by spin is not available point. This also leads to a more serious consequence point. Many scientific research projects cannot be studied in the spaceport point. In summary, LV Yongchang had put these two short-term solutions out of his mind from the beginning point. He took a long breath, leaned back on the back of his office chair, and closed his eyes. His consciousness entered the familiar technology tree space again point after the starship manufacturing technology was unlocked. Although there were still many dim areas around the technology tree, at least the main trunk of the first level civilization technology tree had appeared in front of him point. Looking at the dim quantum long distance communication technology at the top, LV Yongchang's eyes flashed with a trace of entanglement point. Although he has mastered all the quantum communication technologies currently mastered by humans in the past year, looking at the quantum communication technology that symbolizes the peak technology of the first level civilization, he still has some fear in his eyes. The last brain burning scene is still vivid point. However, human civilization has reached this point, and the demand for quantum long-distance communication technology has reached its peak point. It is no exaggeration to say that without long-distance communication, the development speed of human civilization will drop by several levels. After a few minutes of hesitation, a flash of determination flashed in his eyes. Let's go for it point. He didn't believe that this time would have the same result as last time point. At worst, Just lie in bed for a few days, and it would be over. After thinking it through, he quickly focused his attention on the extremely dim icon at the top of the technology tree. After a short wait, the familiar dizziness and burning sensation surged into his brain. The dizziness became stronger and stronger. The familiar black scene in front of his eyes came again. Zuo, Lu Yongchang couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. I'm going to faint again. Is this damn quantum long distance communication so difficult? Thinking of Su Yutang in the office, Lu Yongchang sighed silently in his heart. I guess this time she will be scared again. In a short moment, countless thoughts flashed through Lu Yongchang's mind. But at the moment, when the dizziness reached its peak, a touch of ecstasy rose in his heart. The long-lost prompt finally appeared in his conscious mind. Photom feeling the countless inspirations bursting out of his mind, LV Yongchang fell into a coma with a satisfied smile on his face. Beep. 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 The familiar sound of the buzzer and the familiar smell of disinfectant. LV Yongchang struggled to open his eyes looking at the surroundings. He smiled bitterly again. The sound of the door opening came. Professor Lu, this is the second time you have been in a coma. Looking at the familiar face, LV Yongchang frowned slightly. Are you Dr. Wen? Drive, Wen in a white coat, was stunned for a moment, then smiled and nodded. Yes, it's me. I didn't expect Professor Lu to have such a good memory. It seems that this coma didn't cause much damage to your brain. The corners of LV Yongchang's mouth twitched. What does this mean? He took a deep breath and shook his somewhat sluggish head gently. Dr. Wen, how long have I been in a coma this time? Dr. Wen smiled and handed a medical report to LV Yongchang. Not much, only 24 hours. Compared with the last time, there is a great improvement. LV Yongchang, he always felt that this Dr. Wen was targeting him, but he could not find sufficient evidence. Take a look. This is your medical report. LV Yongchang's eyes moved, and he looked down at the document in front of him. According to the examination, your brain activity is higher than last time. Dr. Wen said in a light tone, although I don't know how you did it, this is undoubtedly a good thing for you and for mankind. Chapter 175 Quantum Communication and Long Distance Communication. LV Yongchang silently looked at the document in front of him, and his guess about the function of the system was verified again. Sure enough, this system was subtly improving his physical condition, and the focus of the improvement was on the brain. Dr. Wen looked at LV Yongchang's silence and chuckled. Don't worry, this test result, except for 0, only I and the chairman know. LV Yongchang nodded gently. He was not worried that this so-called secret would be known by others and arouse suspicion, but, for the sake of safety, the fewer people who knew about this abnormal situation, the better. Now it seems that the chairman has already solved all aspects of the matter for him. By the way, LV Yongchang asked again, when can I be discharged from the hospital? Huh? Dr. Wen raised his eyebrows slightly. So urgent? You just woke up from a coma. Logically, you'd better rest and observe for another day or two. Can I be discharged today? LV Yongchang said after a moment of silence. I need to do a very important research. It's about the future of mankind. At the end, he added. Dr. Wen's expression suddenly became serious. She didn't say anything, but turned her head to look at the various indicators on the instrument beside her. After confirming that everything was fine, she nodded. Okay, in that case, I won't keep you, but there is one more thing I want to remind you of. While Lu Yongchang skillfully reached out to take out the indwelling needle on his body, he cast a puzzled look at Dr. Wen. The one who sent you here is Su Yutang, right? Dr. Wen smiled meaningfully. The little girl is crying. Are you sure you don't want to comfort her? Lu Yongchang smiled bitterly and nodded. Okay, thank you for reminding me. Ling, help me call Fang Zhu. Lu Yongchang, wearing a loose white coat, hurriedly walked in the bright corridor and said in a deep voice, by the way, there are Mozang and others. Let all researchers in the quantum field gather in the main laboratory immediately. As soon as the voice fell, Zero's holographic image instantly appeared beside Lu Yongchang and floated forward at his speed. Professor, academician Mozang and his researchers are studying the architecture of the next generation of quantum superconducting computers. Do we need to remind him? LV Yongchang did not hesitate at all. Tell him to put down what he is doing and come to the main laboratory immediately. Okay, Professor. Zero's holographic image turned into a light spot and dissipated in the air. Main laboratory, academician. MO, what do you think Professor Lu asked us to come to the main laboratory for? A researcher came up to Mo Xiang and asked in a low voice. Mo Xiang looked at the familiar faces in front of him, and there was a bit of confusion in his eyes. I don't know either, but it seems that all the people who came here are researchers in the quantum field. The researcher's eyes lit up, and he asked anxiously, could it be that Professor Lu has any ideas about quantum computers? Mo Xiang looked at a gray-haired old man in front of him, frowned, and shook his head gently. Probably not. See that, academician Tang Wenshan, a great man in the field of quantum communication. I guess this time it's about quantum communication. As he said, he quickly walked forward a few steps and stretched out his right hand to the gray-haired old man in front of him. Mr. Tang, nice to meet you. Long time no see. The gray-haired old man heard the voice and quickly raised his head point the moment he saw Mo Xiang. The old man's face suddenly showed a gentle smile. Academician. Mo, hello. The two people's right hands were instantly held together. I heard about your recent achievements, the old man said with a smile. I didn't expect that such a young boy back then would become the leader of quantum computers now. Mr. Tang, please don't tease me. Facing Tang Wenshan's praise, Mo Xiang quickly lowered his posture. I didn't learn this from you. If it weren't for you, I would probably still be a researcher in some research institute. The researcher on the side. I was offended. Mr. Tang, do you have any news? Mo Xiang approached Tang Wenshan and asked softly, Professor Lu called you over. Is he preparing to move into the field of quantum communication? Tang Wenshan frowned and shook his head gently. I don't know about this either. I just received a notice from Zero. I guess everyone present should have only received a notice from Zero. For details, we have to wait until Professor Lu comes. As soon as the voice fell, the door of the laboratory opened quietly. LV Yongchang, wearing a white coat and a hospital gown inside, appeared in front of everyone. For a moment, the researchers in the entire main laboratory looked strange. Ahem. Yongchang, what are you doing? As the deputy, Fang Zhu was the first to remind him. Seeing Fang Zhu pointing at him, a trace of doubt flashed in LV Yongchang's eyes. When he looked in the direction of Fang Zhu's finger, his face suddenly became awkward. I came out in a hurry and forgot to change clothes. Ahem. LV Yongchang coughed twice, relieved the awkward atmosphere and said, everyone, I called you here to solve a major problem. This is related to the future development and destiny of mankind. Hearing this, everyone's eyes became serious after seeing that everyone's attention had shifted away from his hospital gown. LV Yongchang calmly buttoned up his white coat to cover the hospital gown inside. As LV Yongchang's deputy, Fang Zhu naturally noticed his little move. Fang Zhu. LV Yongchang naturally noticed Fang Zhu's unusually strange look. He silently glared at Fang Zhu, gave him a warning look, and continued as if nothing had happened. Ultra distance communication technology. I believe you have all heard of this name. At present, huge communication delays have become a huge obstacle to the further development of mankind. If humans want to escape the solar system and become a true interstellar civilization, ultra-distant communication is an inevitable threshold. The moment he heard this term, academician Tang Wenshan frowned instantly. Professor LV, are you going to use quantum communication technology to achieve ultra-distant communication? The moment he saw the questioner, LV Yongchang raised his eyebrows slightly. Yes, Mr. Tang, you are an expert in the field of quantum communication. What do you think about this? Tang Wenshan frowned and fell silent. After a long while, he said with hesitation, I think it is difficult to realize the technology of long-distance communication with the help of quantum communication. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.